The train's whistle cut through the afternoon like a knife, and Archer felt his stomach turn over. He'd been standing on the Helena platform for 20 minutes, hat in his hands, trying to remember why this had seemed like a good idea. Behind him, pressed against his leg, was Daniel. The boy hadn't let go of Archer's coat since they'd left the ranch that morning. 6 years old and silent as stone since they'd put his father in the ground. "Uncle Archer?" The small voice was so unexpected that Archer nearly dropped his hat. "Yeah, Dan?" "What if she doesn't like me?" Archer crouched down, eye level with the kid. Daniel had his brother's eyes, that same gray-blue that looked like winter sky. "Then she can get back on the train. We don't need anybody who doesn't want to be here." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The ranch was falling apart. Archer couldn't cook worth a damn, couldn't keep the house clean, couldn't give this boy what he needed. He could work cattle and fix fences and shoot straight, but none of that mattered when you were raising a child alone. The train hissed to a stop, metal screaming against metal. Passengers started climbing down. A businessman with a leather case, 2 ranch hands heading west, an older couple arguing about luggage. Then her. Josephine Hale was thin. That was Archer's first thought. Not delicate thin like the town ladies who fainted at barn dances. This was the kind of thin that came from missing meals, from walking too far with too little. Her dress was dark blue, worn at the cuffs and hem. She carried a single carpet bag that looked older than she was. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Dark brown, almost black, and completely empty. Like she'd seen everything worth seeing and found none of it particularly interesting. She scanned the platform, and when her gaze landed on Archer, something shifted in her expression. Not hope, more like recognition. Like she'd been expecting exactly this. "Mr. Rowan?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "That's me." Archer stood, pulling Daniel with him. "You're Josephine." "Yes." They stared at each other. Archer had written 3 letters to the agency in Chicago. He'd been honest, needed someone to help with the house and the boy, wasn't looking for romance, could offer room and board and a share of whatever the ranch produced. The response had been brief. Josephine Hale, 26, good health, hard worker, available immediately. What the letter hadn't mentioned was the hollowness in her eyes, or the way her hand trembled slightly as she gripped her bag. "This is Daniel," Archer said, because someone had to say something. Josephine looked down at the boy. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she crouched, slowly, like her bones hurt, and held out her hand. "Hello, Daniel." The kid stared at her hand like it might bite him. "He doesn't talk much," Archer said quickly, "since his father, my brother, since last spring." "That's all right." Josephine stayed crouched, hand still extended. Sometimes talking doesn't help anyway. Daniel's fingers slowly uncurled from Archer's coat. He reached out and touched her hand, barely, just fingertips to palm. Josephine didn't grab or pull, she just let him make contact, then withdrew. "Shall we go?" she asked, standing. The wagon ride back to the ranch took 2 hours. Josephine sat in the back with Daniel while Archer drove. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the horses' hooves and the wind pushing through the grassland. Archer kept sneaking glances back. Josephine sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, watching the landscape roll past. Daniel had wedged himself into the corner of the wagon bed, eyes fixed on this stranger who'd just upended his life. "What the hell have I done?" Archer thought. She looked like a strong wind would knock her over. How was she supposed to help with anything? The ranch appeared as they crested the final hill. 200 acres of scrubland and stubborn grass, a house that leaked when it rained, a barn that needed new boards, fences that sagged like tired men. Archer's brother had loved this place, had died trying to make it work, thrown from a half-broke horse and hitting the ground wrong. Archer had been in town buying supplies when it happened. By the time he rode back, Thomas was already gone. "Here we are," he said, pulling the horses to a stop in front of the house. Josephine climbed down without waiting for help. She stood there, bag in hand, studying the weathered wood and crooked porch like she was taking inventory. "It needs work," Archer said defensively. "Everything does." She walked to the front door and waited. Archer realized she was waiting for him to open it, to invite her in. Like this was some kind of social call instead of a business arrangement. He pushed the door open. "Daniel's room is upstairs, first door on the right. There's a spare room next to it. That's yours." Kitchen's through there. Pump's out back. We eat at 6. Josephine stepped inside. Archer watched her take in the chaos. Dishes piled in the sink, mud tracked across the floor, clothes hanging over chairs because he couldn't be bothered with the wardrobe upstairs. The place smelled like burnt coffee and unwashed socks. "I'll need cleaning supplies," she said. "There's some under the I'll find them." She set her bag down by the stairs. "Is there food for dinner?" "Got some bacon, beans, coffee. That'll work." She walked past him into the kitchen without another word. Archer stood there feeling like an intruder in his own house. Daniel brushed past him too, following Josephine like she'd just become the most interesting thing in Montana. By the time Archer finished unhitching the horses and getting them settled, the smell of cooking bacon was drifting from the house. He stood in the yard for a minute, listening to the sounds of someone moving around inside. Cabinet doors opening, water running, the clink of dishes. It had been 3 months since there'd been any sound in that house besides him and Daniel moving around like ghosts. When he finally went inside, Josephine had cleared enough space at the table for 3 plates. The bacon was crispy, the beans were hot, and she'd somehow found bread he didn't remember buying and toasted it over the stove. "Sit," she said. Archer sat. Daniel climbed into his usual chair. Josephine served them both before taking a portion for herself, a portion noticeably smaller than theirs. "You should eat more," Archer said. "This is plenty." They ate in silence. Josephine chewed slowly, methodically, like eating was a chore she had to complete. Daniel kept looking at her, then at Archer, then back at his plate. "The house is dirty," Josephine said finally. "I know. Tomorrow I'll start cleaning. I'll need to know where everything goes." "Most of it can go anywhere. We're not particular." "You should be." She looked at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down. "A clean house is easier to live in than a dirty one. I've been managing." "No," she said quietly. "You've been surviving. There's a difference." The words hit harder than they should have. Archer felt his jaw tighten. "I've been doing the best I can. I know." Her voice didn't soften, but something in her expression shifted. "So have I. That's why I'm here." After dinner, she washed the dishes while Archer put Daniel to bed. The boy still hadn't spoken again, but he let Archer tuck him in without the usual fight. "She seems all right," Archer whispered, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed. Daniel stared at the ceiling. "I know it's strange, having someone new here, but maybe—" Archer didn't know how to finish that sentence. "Maybe it'll help? Maybe she'll stay? Maybe we won't be so alone anymore?" He kissed Daniel's forehead and left the lamp burning low. The kid didn't like the dark anymore. Downstairs, Josephine had finished the dishes and was standing at the window looking out at the darkening land. "Your room's ready," Archer said. "There's blankets in the— I found them." "Right." He hesitated. "Look, about the arrangement. We should probably talk about expectations." She turned to face him. In the lamplight, she looked even thinner, shadows pooling under her cheekbones. "I work," she said. "You provide shelter and food. When the ranch produces, I get a share. If either of us wants to end the arrangement, we give 30 days' notice. Is that still acceptable?" Yes, that's fine." "Good." She moved toward the stairs, then paused. "Mr. Rowan?" "Archer, just Archer?" "Archer." She tested the name like it was a new language. "The boy upstairs, Daniel. What happened to his mother?" "Died in childbirth. Thomas raised him alone until—" He didn't finish. Josephine nodded slowly. "And you took him in?" "He's family. What else was I going to do?" "Most men would have sent him to an orphanage. Most men are idiots." Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. It was gone so fast, Archer thought he'd imagined it. "Good night, Archer." "Good night." She climbed the stairs, each step slow and deliberate, like she was carrying weight nobody else could see. Her door closed softly. Archer sat at the table and poured himself coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Outside, coyotes started their evening song. The wind picked up, rattling the loose board on the north side of the house that he kept meaning to fix. He thought about the woman upstairs in the spare room, thought about the way she'd looked at Daniel, not with pity, but with something like understanding. Thought about her hands, rough and calloused in a way that didn't match her thin frame. "Well, Thomas," he said quietly to the empty room. I hope to hell you're watching over us, because I have no idea what I'm doing. The coffee tasted like dirt, but he drank it anyway. I bet. The next morning, Archer woke to sounds he didn't recognize. Footsteps, the scrape of furniture being moved, water running. He pulled on his pants and stumbled downstairs to find Josephine already dressed, hair pinned back, sleeves rolled up. She'd pushed all the furniture to one side of the main room and was scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. What time is it? He asked. 5:30. Jesus Christ, woman. You'll need breakfast before you work. She didn't look up. There's coffee on the stove and eggs frying. Take them before they burn. Archer looked at the kitchen. Sure enough, his breakfast was laid out. He wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't need to start this early, but the words died in his throat. Because the truth was, he did need to work. The cattle needed checking, the fence in the south pasture needed mending, and he'd been putting off fixing the barn door for 2 weeks. What about you? He asked. I'll eat when this floor is clean. That could take all day. Then I'll eat tomorrow. She wasn't joking. Archer grabbed his breakfast and ate standing up, watching her work. She moved methodically, scrubbing each board until it showed grain again, then moving to the next. Her breathing was labored, not from exertion, but like breathing itself took effort. Are you sick? He asked. No. You sound... I'm fine. She sat back on her heels, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. I've always been like this. Weak lungs. It doesn't stop me from working. Maybe you should rest. Mr. Rowan, Archer, I appreciate the concern, but I know my limits. She met his eyes. And I know what happens to women who can't pull their weight. So unless you're planning to send me back to Chicago, I'm going to finish this floor. There was no anger in her voice, just flat certainty. All right, Archer said quietly. But you eat breakfast first. No arguments. They stared at each other. Josephine blinked first. Fine. She stood, knees cracking, and washed her hands at the pump. Archer fixed her a plate, eggs, bacon, toast with the last of the butter. She ate slowly, but she ate all of it. Where's Daniel? She asked. Still asleep. Kid could sleep through a stampede. Let him rest. He'll wake when he's ready. Archer headed out to work, but he couldn't shake the image of Josephine on her knees, scrubbing floors like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. He didn't know her story, didn't know what had driven her to answer that advertisement, to travel 1,000 miles to marry a stranger. All he knew was that she was here now, and she was trying. That had to count for something. The south fence was worse than he'd thought. 3 posts had rotted through, and the wire was sagging so bad a determined calf could have walked right through. He worked through the morning, digging new holes, setting posts, stringing wire. The sun climbed higher, and sweat soaked through his shirt. Around noon, he looked up to see a small figure walking across the pasture. Daniel, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Hey, Dan, what have you got there? The boy handed him the bundle. Inside was bread and cheese and 2 apples. Miss Josephine said you forgot lunch, Daniel said quietly. She said that, did she? She's cleaning everything, the whole house. She says it'll take 3 days, maybe 4. Daniel squinted up at him. She's not like other ladies. No, she's not. That bother you? Daniel considered this. No, I think maybe it's good. That she's different. Archer ruffled the kid's hair. Yeah, maybe it is. They sat in the grass and shared the lunch. Daniel talked a little about the creek, about a bird he'd seen, about how Josephine had let him help sort through the mess in the kitchen. Not long speeches, just sentences here and there. But it was more than Archer had heard from him in months. When they walked back to the house later, the sun was starting to dip. Josephine was hanging laundry on the line out back, sheets and shirts and Daniel's small clothes, all of them actually clean for the first time in recent memory. She looked up as they approached. Her face was flushed from work, hair escaping its pins, dress damp with water and sweat. Fence fixed? She asked. For now. Good. She pinned the last shirt and wiped her hands on her apron. Dinner in an hour. Chicken and potatoes. Where'd you get chicken? I walked to the Hendersons' place this morning. Mrs. Henderson sold me 2 birds and a dozen eggs. I'll need money for supplies. You walked to the Hendersons? Archer felt his stomach drop. That's 4 miles. 3.5, I measured. Josephine, I needed ingredients. You didn't have any. So I walked. She said it like it was the most logical thing in the world. Tomorrow I'll need to go to town. There's a list on the kitchen table. She went inside before he could respond. Daniel looked up at him. She's very determined. Yeah, Archer said. She really is. Dinner that night was the best meal they'd had in months. The chicken was perfectly cooked, the potatoes seasoned with herbs Josephine had found growing wild behind the barn. She'd even made gravy. This is incredible, Archer said around a mouthful of food. It's adequate. Josephine picked at her own plate. I can do better with proper supplies. How'd you learn to cook like this? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. For a moment, Archer thought she wouldn't answer. I worked in a restaurant, she said finally. In Chicago. Before. Before what? Before I left. That was all she'd give him. Archer knew better than to push. Everyone out here had a before they didn't want to talk about. Hell, he had his own. After dinner, Josephine washed up while Archer read to Daniel from an old book about cowboys and Indians. The boy fell asleep halfway through, head on Archer's shoulder. When he came back downstairs, Josephine was sitting at the table with a cup of tea, staring at nothing. You should rest, Archer said. Soon. You've been working since before dawn. So have you. He poured himself coffee and sat across from her. They didn't speak. Outside, the night sounds of the ranch rose up, cattle lowing in the distance, horses shifting in the barn, crickets singing their endless song. Can I ask you something? Archer said finally. You can ask. Why'd you come here, really? Josephine took a long sip of tea. When she set the cup down, her hands were steady. Because there was nothing left for me in Chicago. Because I needed to be somewhere I could work without questions. Because... She trailed off, then started again. Because sometimes starting over is the only choice that makes sense. Running from something? Aren't we all? Fair point. Archer nodded slowly. I'm not going to pry into your past, he said. But I need to know you're not bringing trouble here. Not to this place, and especially not to Daniel. I'm not. Her eyes met his. I promise you that. Whatever I left behind stays behind. This is a new beginning, for all of us. Archer wanted to believe her, needed to believe her, because the alternative was sending her away. And he wasn't sure any of them could survive that now. All right, he said. Then we start fresh. No questions about before. Thank you. She finished her tea and stood. At the base of the stairs, she paused. Archer? Yeah? Thank you for letting me stay, for giving me a chance. You're the one doing us a favor. We'll see. She climbed the stairs slower than the night before. Archer sat in the quiet house and listened to the settling sounds of three people trying to become something like a family. The days fell into a pattern. Archer worked the ranch while Josephine worked the house. And Daniel started coming back to life. It happened gradually, a word here, a laugh there. He started following Josephine around, helping with small tasks. She never told him to go away, never treated him like he was in the way. Instead, she gave him jobs, simple things like sorting vegetables or folding cloth, and praised him when he did them well. You're good with him? Archer said one afternoon, watching them work together in the garden Josephine had started. He's a good boy. He just needed someone to notice. I notice. You survive him. It's different. She pulled a weed and added it to the pile. You make sure he eats and sleeps and doesn't die. That's survival. But he needs more than that. Like what? Routine, structure. Someone who sees him as more than a responsibility. She glanced at Daniel, who was carefully watering the tomato plants. He needs to know he belongs somewhere. He belongs here. Then show him that. That night, Archer asked Daniel to help with the evening feeding. The boy's face lit up like Christmas morning. Together they brought hay to the horses, checked the water troughs, locked up the chickens Josephine had convinced Archer to buy. Can we do this again tomorrow? Daniel asked as they walked back to the house. Every night, if you want. I want. Archer's throat tightened. He put his hand on Daniel's shoulder, and for the first time in months, the kid leaned into the touch instead of pulling away. Inside, Josephine had dinner waiting. The house smelled like bread and stew. Candles burned on the table. Not for romance, just because she believed meals should be civilized. They ate together, talked a little. Daniel told a story about a frog he'd found by the creek. Josephine smiled, a real smile, not that ghost of one she usually offered. After Daniel went to bed, Archer and Josephine sat on the porch. The night was cool, stars scattered thick across the sky. "I'm going to town tomorrow," she said, "to buy fabric. I want to make curtains for Daniel's room." "He doesn't need curtains." "Everyone needs curtains. Privacy matters. It's an expense we don't—" "I have my own money." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Not much, but enough for fabric, unless you forbid it." "I'm not forbidding anything, but that money's yours. You should save it." "I'll spend it how I see fit." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "Besides, this is my home now too. I should be allowed to improve it." Before he could respond, she went inside. Archer sat there feeling like he'd lost an argument he didn't know he was having. The woman was infuriating, also impressive. Maybe both things could be true at once. The next day, Josephine took the wagon to town. She came back with fabric, thread, and a glazed look in her eyes that Archer recognized. She'd been asked questions about where she came from, who she was, why she was living with Archer Rowan. "How bad was it?" he asked as he helped unload the wagon. "The general store owner asked if we were married." "What'd you tell him?" "The truth, that we have an arrangement." She lifted a bolt of dark green fabric. He seemed disappointed. "People like their gossip." "Let them gossip. I don't care what they think." But she did care. Archer could see it in the way she held herself a little stiffer, in the tension around her eyes. Small-town judgment could be brutal, especially toward women who didn't fit the expected mold. "We could get married," he said before he could think better of it. "Legally, I mean. It would make things easier." Josephine stared at him. "Are you proposing?" "I'm offering a solution to a social problem." "That's the least romantic thing I've ever heard." "I'm not trying to be romantic. I'm being practical." She set the fabric down carefully. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't need rescuing from gossip, and marriage should mean something more than convenience." "Does it? To you?" "It used to." Her voice went distant. "Once." She didn't elaborate. Archer didn't push. That evening, Josephine spread the green fabric across the table and began measuring. Daniel watched, fascinated, as she cut careful patterns and pinned them together. "What will they look like?" he asked. "Like windows that can sleep," she said. "Windows don't sleep." "These ones will." She worked late into the night, the steady rhythm of her needle pushing through cloth. Archer read by lamplight, pretending not to watch her. But he noticed everything. The way her shoulders curved forward, the way she stopped occasionally to catch her breath, the way her hands never quite stopped shaking. "You should rest," he said around 10. "Almost done." "Josephine, please." She didn't look up. "Let me finish. I need to finish." There was something desperate in her voice. Archer shut his mouth and let her work. At midnight, she hung the first curtain in Daniel's room. The boy was already asleep, but she smoothed the fabric anyway, making sure it hung straight. "Perfect," she whispered. They stood in the doorway, looking at the small room that was starting to look like someone actually lived there. The curtain moved slightly in the night breeze. Daniel slept peacefully, face relaxed in a way Archer hadn't seen in months. "You're making a difference here," Archer said quietly. "You know that? I'm sewing curtains." "You're building a home." Josephine's breath caught. She didn't cry. Archer had never seen her cry, but something cracked in her expression. "I want this to work," she said. "I want to belong somewhere again." "You do belong here." "Do I?" She turned to face him. "Or am I just useful? Another pair of hands to make your life easier? Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think." She hugged herself, looking suddenly small. "I've been useful before. It didn't end well." "What happened?" She shook her head. "Another time. Maybe." They stood in the hallway, two broken people trying to hold broken pieces together. Archer wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but he didn't know how. Didn't know if she'd want it. "Good night, Josephine," he said finally. "Good night." He listened to her door close, then went to his own room. Through the walls, he could hear her moving around, getting ready for bed, settling in. The house was full of sounds now, full of life. It scared him more than he wanted to admit, because life was fragile, and people left, and he'd already buried too many. But maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The weeks turned into a month. Josephine continued her transformation of the house. She cleaned years of neglect, planted a garden that actually grew, convinced the chickens to lay more eggs, and somehow made their meager supplies stretch further than Archer thought possible. And Daniel thrived. He talked more, laughed more, started asking questions about everything. Why were clouds white? How did chickens know to lay eggs? Could horses really sleep standing up? Josephine answered every question with patience. She taught him to read better, to write his letters, to help with cooking. She treated him like he mattered, like his thoughts and questions were worth hearing. Archer watched it happen with a mixture of gratitude and fear, because the better things got, the more he had to lose. One morning he found Josephine in the garden, hands in the dirt, breathing hard. She didn't notice him at first. When she finally looked up, her face was pale. "I'm fine," she said before he could ask. "You don't look fine. I just need a moment." He crouched next to her. "How long have your lungs been this bad?" "Always. Since I was a child." She sat back, wiping dirt from her hands. "Some days are worse than others." "What can I do?" "Nothing. There's nothing to do except keep breathing." She laughed, but it turned into a cough. "Ironic, isn't it? Have you seen a doctor? Doctors cost money, and they can't fix what's broken inside me anyway." She pulled herself up using the fence post. "I'm stronger than I look, Archer. I won't break." But everyone breaks eventually. Archer had learned that the hard way. Still, he let her work, let her push herself. Because the alternative, treating her like she was fragile, would crush her faster than any illness. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder shook the house, and lightning turned the sky white. Rain hammered the roof like fists. Archer woke to a small hand shaking his shoulder. "Uncle Archer?" Daniel's voice was thick with tears. "I can't find Miss Josephine." Archer's heart jumped. He pulled on pants and followed Daniel downstairs. Josephine's door was open, room empty. They found her on the porch, sitting in the dark, watching the storm. "Josephine?" Archer stepped outside. "What are you doing?" "Watching." "You'll catch your death out here." "No, I'll catch my breath." She didn't take her eyes off the lightning. "The air's easier to breathe when it rains. Don't ask me why, it just is." Daniel climbed onto the bench beside her. Without a word, Josephine pulled him close, tucking him under her arm. The boy snuggled in like he'd been doing it his whole life. Archer stood there, watching them watch the storm. Three broken people finding shelter in each other. "Come inside," he said finally. "Both of you, before you're soaked through." "In a minute," Josephine said. "Just a minute more." But minutes turned into an hour, and by the time they finally came in, they were all drenched. Josephine made hot tea while Archer got Daniel dried off and back to bed. When he came downstairs, she was still in her wet dress, staring into her teacup. "You'll get sick," he said. "Probably." "Then go change." "In a minute." He grabbed a blanket from the couch and draped it around her shoulders. She startled slightly, then relaxed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome." They sat in silence. Outside, the storm raged on. "I love storms," Josephine said eventually. "They're honest. They don't pretend to be anything they're not. Unlike people." "Unlike people." She sipped her tea. "I haven't been honest with you, Archer." His stomach tightened. "About what?" "About why I left Chicago. About what I'm running from." She set her cup down with shaking hands. "There was a man, my employer. He promised me things, security, stability, maybe even marriage. I believed him because I was lonely and stupid and wanted to believe someone could love me." Archer waited, didn't interrupt. "He lied," she continued, "about everything. When I finally understood what he really wanted, I tried to leave. He didn't take it well." She pulled the blanket tighter. "So I ran. Took what little money I'd saved and bought a train ticket west. Answered your advertisement because it was the furthest I could get from him." "Will he come looking for you?" "No. I made sure of that." "How?" She met his eyes. Some questions are better left unanswered. They stared at each other. Archer saw steel beneath her fragile exterior, the kind of steel forged in fire. "Does this change things?" she asked. "Between us?" "Should it?" "I don't know. I just told you I'm running from my past." "So am I," Archer said. "We all are. The difference is whether we let it catch us." And if it does, then we deal with it. Together. Josephine's eyes glistened. Not quite tears, but close. I'm not used to together, she said. Neither am I. But maybe that's something we figure out as we go. She nodded slowly. Maybe. The storm passed sometime before dawn. When Archer woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows Josephine had cleaned weeks ago. He could hear her downstairs, already working, already pushing forward. He found her in the kitchen with Daniel, teaching him to crack eggs without getting shell in the bowl. Morning, Archer said. Morning. She glanced at him, and something was different in her expression. Lighter. Coffee's ready? Thanks. They ate breakfast together, eggs and toast and wild strawberry jam Josephine had made. Daniel chattered about the storm, about the creek that would be running high, about whether the chickens were scared. Josephine listened and responded and laughed at his jokes. Archer watched them and felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. Hope. Dangerous because hope could be crushed, because happiness was temporary, because everything good eventually turned to dust. But looking at Josephine's smile, real and unguarded, and Daniel's bright eyes, Archer couldn't help it. He hoped anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. Summer arrived like a furnace, turning the Montana grassland the color of old leather. The heat pressed down on everything, making even breathing feel like work. Josephine moved slower during those weeks, her lungs struggling against the thick air, but she never stopped. If anything, she worked harder, as if proving something to herself that nobody else could see. Archer noticed. He always noticed now. You need to rest, he said one afternoon, finding her bent over the vegetable garden, sweat soaking through the back of her dress. The tomatoes need picking before they split. The tomatoes can wait. No, they can't. She straightened slowly, one hand pressed to her ribs. Nothing waits out here. You know that better than I do. She was right, and that made it worse. The frontier didn't care if you were tired or sick or barely holding on. It just kept demanding, kept taking, kept testing whether you had anything left to give. Daniel came running from the barn, face flushed. Uncle Archer, one of the calves got through the fence again. Archer bit back a curse. That damn calf had been testing every weak spot in the pasture for a week. Which one? The spotted one. She's down by Henderson's property line. Of course she is. Archer grabbed his hat. Stay with Josephine, all right? Help her with those tomatoes. I want to come with you. Not this time, Dan. It's too hot. The boy's face fell, but he didn't argue. That was new, too. Daniel was learning when to push and when to let things go. Josephine had taught him that, though Archer couldn't figure out how. He saddled up and rode out, following the calf's tracks through grass that crunched under the horse's hooves. Everything was dry, desperate for rain that wouldn't come for another month at least. The cattle were getting lean, and Archer's water reserves were dropping faster than he'd planned. By the time he found the calf, chewing contentedly on Henderson's better grass, the sun was starting to dip. He roped her and started the slow walk back, the animal protesting every step. Henderson himself was working his own fence line. He waved Archer over. That's the third time this month, Henderson called out. I know. I'm working on it. Might want to work faster. Henderson wasn't unfriendly, just stating facts. Can't have your stock mixing with mine. Causes problems come branding time. I'll fix the fence this week. Henderson nodded, then shifted his weight like a man getting ready to say something uncomfortable. How's that woman of yours doing? Archer felt his jaw tighten. Josephine's fine. Wife says she saw her in town last week. Said she looked poorly. She's managing. That's not what I asked. Henderson spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Look, I ain't trying to pry, but if she needs help, medical help, Doc Morrison makes rounds this way twice a month. My wife could arrange it, discreet-like. The offer was genuine, and that made Archer's irritation fade slightly. I appreciate that, but Josephine wouldn't want charity. It ain't charity. It's neighbors looking out for neighbors. Henderson reset his hat. You've got something good building over there, Rowan. Don't let pride get in the way of keeping it. Archer rode home thinking about those words. Something good. Was that what they were building, or was he just fooling himself, mistaking temporary stability for something permanent? The house was quiet when he got back. The calf secured, horse fed, and watered, Archer washed up at the pump and went inside. Dinner was laid out. Cold chicken and bread and sliced tomatoes that Josephine must have picked after all. But she wasn't at the table. Daniel sat alone, eating slowly. "Where is she?" Archer asked. "Upstairs. She said she needed to lie down." Archer took the stairs two at a time. Josephine's door was closed. He knocked softly. "I'm all right," came her voice, thin and breathless. "Can I come in?" A pause. "Yes." She was sitting on the edge of her bed, still fully dressed, hands folded in her lap. Her breathing sounded like wind through a cracked window. "How bad?" Archer asked. "It'll pass. It always does." Henderson offered to send the doctor. Her eyes snapped to his. "No." "Josephine," I said no. She stood, swayed slightly, then steadied herself against the bedpost. Doctors ask questions. They write things down. And word spreads. Word about what? She looked away. "Just trust me. No doctors." Archer wanted to argue, but the fear in her eyes stopped him. Whatever she was running from, it still had claws in her. "All right," he said quietly. "No doctors. But you need to rest. Properly rest. Not this pretending you're fine when you're barely standing. I'll rest when the work's done." "The work's never done. That's the whole point of living out here. There's always something else." He moved closer. "Take tomorrow off, just one day. Sleep late, read a book, do nothing." "I don't know how to do nothing." "Then learn." They stared at each other. Finally, Josephine nodded. "One day," she said, "but only because you're being insufferable about it. I can live with that." He left her there and went back downstairs. Daniel had finished eating and was washing his plate without being asked. Another thing Josephine had taught him. "Is she going to be okay?" the boy asked. "Yeah, just needs rest. She works too hard. I know. You should make her stop." Archer laughed despite himself. "You try making Josephine do anything. Let me know how that goes." Daniel smiled, but it faded quickly. What if she gets too sick? What if she has to leave? There it was. The fear that lived in all of them, that this fragile thing they'd built could collapse at any moment. "She's not leaving," Archer said, hoping it was true. "She's stronger than she looks." "But what if—" "Dan." Archer crouched down to eye level. "We can't live in the what-ifs. We just have to trust that tomorrow will come and we'll deal with whatever it brings. Together. That's all any of us can do." The boy nodded, but his eyes were still worried. Too worried for someone so young. Archer pulled him into a hug, and Daniel clung to him like he was drowning. That night, Archer lay awake listening to the sounds of the house, Josephine's labored breathing through the walls, Daniel shifting in his sleep, the wind testing the corners of the building, looking for weaknesses. He thought about Henderson's words, something good. But good things required care, attention, constant maintenance, and Archer wasn't sure he knew how to do any of that. The next morning, Josephine actually stayed in bed. Archer could hear her moving around up there, but she didn't come down until almost 9. When she finally appeared, she looked embarrassed. "I feel useless," she announced. "Good," Archer said. "You should feel useless at least once a month. It's character building." "That doesn't make any sense." "None of this makes sense. We're just making it up as we go." She actually smiled at that. A real smile. Not the careful ones she usually rationed out. Daniel spent the day showing Josephine his favorite spots around the ranch. The creek where the water pooled deep enough to see fish. The old oak tree with branches low enough to climb. The place where you could see 3 different mountain peaks if you stood just right. Archer watched them from a distance while he worked on the fence. The boy talked constantly, and Josephine listened like every word mattered. Occasionally she'd laugh, a sound so rare that it made Archer stop what he was doing just to hear it properly. Around noon, they brought him lunch again. Josephine had made sandwiches and lemonade from the lemons she'd somehow convinced to grow in her garden. "This is good," Archer said, biting into the sandwich. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised. I'm grateful." Something in her expression softened. "You're welcome." They sat in the grass, the 3 of them, eating lunch in the shade of the fence line. Daniel chattered about a snake he'd seen, non-poisonous, he was quick to point out, and Josephine told him about the snakes in Illinois where she'd grown up. "Wait," Archer said. "I thought you were from Chicago." Josephine's face went carefully blank. "I lived in Chicago. I grew up in a small town about 60 miles south." "What was it like?" Small, poor, the kind of place where everyone knows your business and holds it against you. She stood, brushing grass from her skirt. I should get back. Even on rest days, there's nothing, Archer interrupted. Rest day means rest. Daniel and I will handle dinner. You'll burn the house down. Then we'll eat outside. Won't be the worst meal we've had. Daniel jumped up. Can we make eggs? I'm good at eggs now. Sure, kid. We'll make eggs. Josephine looked between them, something complicated working across her face. All right, but if you burn my kitchen, I'm making you rebuild it. Fair enough. She walked back toward the house, moving easier than she had in days. Archer and Daniel cleaned up the lunch remains and got back to work. Uncle Archer? Daniel said after a while. Yeah? Do you like her, Miss Josephine? Archer hammered a nail before answering. Yeah, I do. Like her? The way Papa liked Mama? I don't know, Dan. It's complicated. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to explain things. Sometimes complicated just means complicated. There's no simpler way to say it. He set the hammer down. But yeah, I care about her. More than I probably should. Why shouldn't you? But because caring about people means you can lose them. And losing people... He couldn't finish that sentence. Didn't need to. Daniel understood loss better than most adults. But we already lost people, the boy said quietly. Papa, Mama. We lost them anyway, even though we cared. So maybe caring isn't the problem. Archer looked at his nephew, this kid who'd seen too much, learned too much, grown up too fast. When'd you get so smart? Miss Josephine says I've always been smart. I just needed someone to notice. She's right about that. They worked together until the sun started dropping. The fence was finally solid, properly braced, good enough to hold even the most determined calf. Archer stepped back and surveyed their work. Not bad, he said. Not bad, Daniel echoed. Inside, Josephine was reading on the porch, an old book Archer's brother had loved. She looked up as they approached. Fence done? Done and tested? Good. Now go wash up. You both smell like horses and sweat. You say that like it's a bad thing, Archer said. It is a bad thing, especially at the dinner table. But she was smiling when she said it. Dinner was chaotic. Eggs scrambled but edible. Toast burned on one side, coffee too strong. But they ate it together and nobody complained. Afterward, Daniel fell asleep on the couch before 8, worn out from the day's adventure. Archer carried him upstairs and tucked him in. The green curtains Josephine had made moved gently in the evening breeze. The room smelled like clean sheets and the lavender she'd hung in bundles from the ceiling. When he came back down, Josephine was on the porch again, watching the last light fade from the sky. Mind if I join you? Archer asked. It's your porch. It's our porch. He sat down beside her. Everything here is ours now. Might as well get used to saying it. She didn't respond right away, then, I'm not used to having an ours. Neither am I. But we're learning. They sat in comfortable silence. A coyote sang somewhere in the distance. The first stars started showing themselves. Thank you, Josephine said finally. For what? For making me rest. For taking care of dinner, even though it was terrible. She glanced at him. For letting me be part of this. You don't have to thank me for that. I do, though. Because you could have sent me away. When I told you about Chicago, about running, you could have put me back on that train. Why would I do that? Because I'm trouble. Because I came here under false pretenses. Because nothing. Archer turned to face her. You came here looking for a new start. So did I. So did Daniel. We're all running from something, Josephine. The only difference is whether we run alone or together. Her eyes glistened in the fading light. I don't want to be alone anymore. Then don't be. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to name. Archer wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance that always seemed to exist between them, but he didn't. Not yet. I should go to bed, Josephine said, standing. Early start tomorrow. I thought you were resting. I rested today. Tomorrow we work. You're impossible. So I've been told. She paused at the door. Good night, Archer. Good night. He listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the creak of her door, the settling sounds of the house preparing for sleep. And he sat there in the dark, wondering when exactly this arrangement had stopped being practical and started being something else entirely. The next weeks fell into their rhythm. Archer worked the ranch, Josephine worked the house, and Daniel grew like a weed, taller, stronger, more confident. The garden produced enough vegetables to feed them with some left over. The chickens laid reliably. Even the cattle seemed to settle, as if sensing that the chaos had given way to order. But order, Archer was learning, was just another word for the calm before the storm. It started with a letter. Josephine collected the mail when she went to town, a weekly trip she'd made her own. Usually it was bills, catalogs, maybe a letter from Archer's cousin in Wyoming. This time she came back pale, a single envelope clutched in her hand. "What's wrong?" Archer asked, meeting her at the wagon. "Nothing, just nothing." But her hands were shaking as she handed him the other mail. "Josephine, it's mine. Private." She clutched the envelope tighter. "I'll deal with it." She went inside before he could press further. Archer unloaded the supplies alone, unease crawling up his spine. That envelope. He'd seen the handwriting, neat and precise. Expensive paper, a Chicago postmark. Something from her past had found her. That night, Josephine barely ate. She moved through dinner mechanically, answering Daniel's questions in single syllables. After the boy went to bed, she disappeared into her room without a word. Archer gave her an hour, then knocked on her door. "I'm tired," she called out. "I don't care, we need to talk." A long pause. Then the door opened. Josephine's eyes were red but dry. She held the letter, open now, read multiple times, judging by the creases. "Is it him?" Archer asked. "The man from Chicago?" "No, his wife." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Apparently I'm needed back. There are questions about missing money. Unless I return to clear up this misunderstanding, she'll involve the law." Archer's blood went cold. Missing money? Money I earned, money I saved, money he promised was mine. Josephine's voice was flat. "When I left, I took what I'd worked for. He reported it as theft. That's not theft. It is if you're a rich man with connections, and I'm nobody." She folded the letter carefully. "She's giving me 2 weeks to return, or she'll send someone to fetch me. Let them come." "Archer, I'm serious. Let them come. This is Montana, not Illinois. They've got no authority here." "They don't need authority. They need money, and they have plenty of that." She moved to the window, looking out at the dark land. "I should leave before they make trouble for you and Daniel." "No." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Archer crossed the room to stand beside her. "You think running will solve this, but it won't. You'll just end up somewhere else, looking over your shoulder waiting for the next letter." "So what do you suggest? I can't fight them." "Maybe not alone." He watched her reflection in the glass. "But you're not alone anymore." She turned to face him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we deal with this. Together. We get a lawyer, we document everything, we build a case. And if they want to send someone out here, fine, but they'll be dealing with both of us." "Why would you do that? This isn't your problem." "Yes, it is, because you're—" He stopped, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Because you're part of this family now, and we protect our own." Josephine's breath caught. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped back, putting safe distance between them. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He kept his voice steady. "But it has to be your choice. You can run if you want. Take some money, catch a train west, start over somewhere else. Or you can stay and fight. Either way, I'll help however I can." She looked at the letter again, then at him. "If I stay and fight, it could get ugly. They might come here. They might make accusations. Let them. They might hurt the ranch, your reputation. My reputation survived my brother's death and raising a kid alone. It'll survive this too." "But, Josephine," he waited until she met his eyes. "Do you want to stay?" The question was simple, but the answer was everything. She stood there, this woman who'd arrived looking half dead and had somehow breathed life back into his broken home, and he realized he was holding his breath. "Yes, she said finally. I want to stay. Then we'll make it work. The relief that washed over her face nearly undid him. She swayed slightly, and without thinking, Archer reached out to steady her, his hands on her arms, her hands coming up to grip his wrists, just for balance, just for a moment. But the moment stretched, and in that stretch, something shifted. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to. Thank you, she said again, stronger this time. He let her go, stepped back, put safe distance between them again. We'll go to town tomorrow, find a lawyer, start building your case. She nodded. All right. And Josephine, stop thanking me. We're in this together. That's what together means. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I'm still learning that part. So am I. He left her there and went to his own room, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept turning over the problem. A rich man in Chicago, angry about a woman who got away. Money he claimed was stolen. A wife willing to threaten legal action. It was a mess. But it was their mess now. The next morning, they drove into town together. Daniel stayed with the Hendersons, an arrangement Josephine had made, showing a trust in the neighbors that still surprised Archer. The lawyer's office was above the general store. Marcus Webb had been practicing law in Montana for 20 years, and he'd seen everything from claim jumpers to cattle rustlers. He listened to Josephine's story without judgment, taking notes in careful script. Do you have anything in writing? Webb asked. Any documentation of your employment, your wages? No, it was all verbal. Letters? Witnesses who can verify your story? There might be other staff who remember, but they won't testify. They need their jobs. Webb leaned back in his chair. I'll be honest with you, Miss Hale. Miss Hale, this will be difficult. Your word against a wealthy man's, with no documentation, no witnesses willing to testify. And if he's filed theft charges back in Illinois, technically there could be extradition proceedings. Josephine's face went white. Archer reached over and took her hand without thinking. She gripped it like a lifeline. But, Webb continued, Montana law is different from Illinois law. And if you can prove you've established residency here, made this your home, that complicates things significantly. How do we prove that? Archer asked. Webb looked between them, noting their joined hands. Well, marriage would be the simplest way. Married women have different legal protections, and a husband's testimony carries weight in Montana courts. We're not married, Josephine said quickly. No, but you could be. Webb pulled out a form. Montana recognizes common law marriage under certain circumstances. Or you could make it official. Either way, it would strengthen your position considerably. Archer felt Josephine's hand trembling in his. We need to think about this. Of course, but don't think too long. If they're serious about sending someone, you'll want your affairs in order before that happens. Webb stood. In the meantime, I'll draft a letter stating that Miss Hale is under legal representation and any further contact should come through my office. That'll buy us some time. They thanked him and left. The walk back to the wagon was silent. You don't have to marry me, Josephine said finally. I know. Webb was just suggesting options. I know that too. She stopped walking. Archer, look at me. He did. I won't trap you into marriage because I made bad choices in Chicago. That's not fair to you or Daniel. Is that what you think this would be, a trap? What else would it be? We barely know each other. We know enough. He took both her hands now, making her look at him. We know we work well together. We know Daniel's thriving. We know this arrangement, whatever we're calling it, is working better than either of us expected. That's not the same as marriage. No, it's not. But maybe it's enough to start with. He took a breath. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking if you want to stay. If you want to make this official, legal, protected. If you want to stop running and start building something permanent. And if I do, what then? Then we figure it out, same as we've been doing. He squeezed her hands. I'm not promising romance or grand gestures, but I can promise partnership, honesty, protection, a home. Josephine looked down at their joined hands. That's more than I've ever had. Is it enough? She raised her eyes to his. They were full of fear and hope, and something else he couldn't quite name. Yes, she said. It's enough. They got married 3 days later in Webb's office. The ceremony took 10 minutes. Henderson and his wife served as witnesses. Daniel stood beside Josephine, holding her hand through the whole thing. When it was done, Marcus Webb shook their hands. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Rowan. You're now legally married in the eyes of Montana law. Mrs. Rowan. The name sounded strange to Archer's ears. Strange, but not wrong. They celebrated with dinner at the hotel restaurant, the first meal they'd eaten in public as a family. Daniel was thrilled, ordering pie he didn't finish. Josephine barely touched her food, but she smiled when Archer caught her eye. On the way home, Daniel fell asleep in the back of the wagon. Josephine sat beside Archer on the bench, the Montana sky spreading stars above them. "Archer?" she said quietly. "Yeah? I know you didn't plan for any of this. Plans change. That's not always bad. But you should know." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm going to try to be a good wife. Not in the traditional sense, maybe, but in the ways that matter. I'm going to work hard and be honest and do my best by you and Daniel. I know you will. And her voice dropped. I know this isn't a love match. I know it's practical, but I'm grateful. For the protection, for the partnership, for the chance to have a real home." Archer didn't respond right away. He thought about love, about his brother, and the wife who'd died too young. Thought about passion and romance and all the things people wrote poems about. Then he thought about Josephine scrubbing floors at dawn, teaching Daniel to read, making curtains at midnight. Thought about her laugh, rare as rain, her strength, quiet as stone. "Maybe love looks different than we think," he said finally. "Maybe it's not about grand gestures. Maybe it's about showing up every day and choosing each other over and over. Is that what you think we're doing?" "Yeah, I think maybe it is." She didn't say anything else, but she moved closer on the bench, not touching, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. When they got home, Archer carried Daniel inside and put him to bed. When he came back down, Josephine was standing in the hallway looking uncertain. "Your room's the same," Archer said, understanding immediately. "Nothing has to change unless you want it to. People can expect whatever they want. This is our marriage. We make the rules." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you." "Stop thanking me." "I'll try." She started toward the stairs, then stopped, turned back. Before Archer could react, she stepped close and kissed his cheek, quick and light, barely there. "Good night, husband," she said. Then she was gone, climbing the stairs to her room. Archer stood there touching his cheek, feeling the ghost of her lips against his skin. "Good night, wife," he said to the empty hallway. He went to bed thinking about that kiss. Nothing passionate, nothing desperate, just a simple gesture of gratitude and maybe something more. It was enough to keep him awake half the night, mind turning over possibilities he'd been trying not to consider. The next morning, everything was the same and completely different. Josephine made breakfast as always. Daniel chattered as always. But now there was a ring on Josephine's finger, plain silver, purchased at the general store, and a certificate in Webb's office that said they belonged to each other. "Mrs. Henderson says we should have a party," Daniel announced over eggs. "A party?" Josephine looked alarmed. "To celebrate. She says that's what people do when they get married." "We're not really the party type," Archer said, "but everyone wants to come. Mrs. Henderson says the whole town's talking about it." "I'm sure they are," Josephine muttered. "Can we? Please? I've never been to a real party." Archer looked at Josephine. She looked back, clearly uncomfortable, but not saying no. That was new, her willingness to be uncomfortable for Daniel's sake. "One party," she said finally. "Small, just neighbors." "Yes!" Daniel jumped up. "Can I tell Mrs. Henderson?" "Sure, kid." He ran off, leaving them alone in the kitchen. "I hate parties," Josephine said. "I know. People will stare, ask questions." "Probably. They'll want to know why we got married so fast. We'll tell them it made practical sense." Archer refilled his coffee. "Or we'll tell them it's none of their business. Your choice." She almost smiled. "You're surprisingly good at this." "At what?" "Being married to someone who doesn't know how to be married. We're learning together, that's the whole point." The party happened 2 weeks later. Henderson and his wife insisted on hosting, which meant Archer and Josephine just had to show up. The whole thing made Josephine anxious. Archer could see it in the way she gripped her hands together, the way her breathing got shallow. "We don't have to go," he said as they were getting ready. Yes, we do, for Daniel. Daniel would understand, but I wouldn't. She looked at herself in the small mirror, smoothing her best dress. I have to learn to stop hiding. If this is my home, if these are my neighbors, then I need to face them. All right, but if it gets too much, we leave. No arguments. Deal. The Henderson place was decorated with ribbons and wildflowers. At least 20 people showed up, more than Archer had expected for a Friday evening. They brought food and well wishes and curiosity barely disguised as politeness. Mrs. Henderson pulled Josephine aside almost immediately, asking questions about the wedding, the dress, the future. Archer watched from across the room, ready to intervene if needed. She's doing well, Henderson said, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of whiskey. For now. Town's been talking, you know. I figured. Most of it's good. People saying you finally got smart, bringing a woman in to help with the boy. Henderson sipped his drink. Some saying it happened awful fast. It did happen fast. Any particular reason? Archer looked at his neighbor. They'd known each other 5 years now, had helped each other through hard winters and harder times. Henderson deserved honesty. She needed protection, legal protection, and I needed... He stopped, realizing the truth as he said it. I needed her to stay. Henderson nodded slowly. That's good enough reason for me. The evening wore on. Daniel ran wild with the Henderson kids, happier than Archer had seen him in months. Josephine moved through conversations carefully, answering questions without giving much away. She was good at it, the art of seeming open while remaining closed. Around 9, Archer saw her slip outside. He gave her 10 minutes, then followed. She was sitting on the porch steps, head tilted back, breathing the cool night air. You all right? He asked. I am now. It was just a lot of people, a lot of questions. He sat beside her. You did good in there. I smiled and nodded and said very little. That's not doing good. That's surviving. Sometimes surviving is all we've got. She leaned against him, just slightly, just for a moment, and Archer felt something in his chest crack open. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Do you regret it, marrying me? No. You answered that awfully fast, because it's true. He turned to look at her. Do you regret it? I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. They sat in comfortable silence. From inside they could hear laughter and music. Someone had brought a fiddle. Daniel's voice rose above the others, excited and young and alive. He's happy, Josephine said. Yeah. We did that together. We did. She stood, brushing off her skirt. We should probably go back in. Probably. But neither of them moved. They stood there on the porch, 2 people who'd stumbled into each other's lives and were slowly figuring out what that meant. Archer? Josephine's voice was quiet. Yeah? Thank you for marrying me, even if it was just practical. Before he could respond, she went inside. Archer stood alone in the dark, wondering when exactly practical had stopped being the right word for what he felt. The letter came 3 weeks after the wedding, and this time it wasn't from Chicago. It was from a law firm in Helena, representing interests in Illinois. The language was cold and precise. Mrs. Josephine Rowan, formerly Hale, was required to appear for questioning regarding the alleged theft of $600 from her former employer, Mr. Charles Whitmore. Failure to comply would result in formal charges and extradition proceedings. Archer watched the color drain from Josephine's face as she read it. $600, she whispered. I didn't take $600. How much did you take? $240, exactly what I'd earned over 18 months. Her hands shook. He's lying, adding to it, making it worse. Daniel looked up from his drawing at the kitchen table. What's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart, Josephine said automatically, then caught herself. They'd promised each other, no more hiding things from the boy. He'd lived through too much to be treated like he was fragile. There's a problem with some people back where I used to live, but we're handling it. Are they trying to hurt you? In a way, yes. Then Uncle Archer will stop them. He's good at stopping bad things. The simple faith in the boy's voice made Archer's chest tighten. I'm going to try, Dan. They took the letter to Webb that afternoon. The lawyer read it twice, his expression darkening. This is more aggressive than I expected, he said. They're not just threatening anymore, they're mobilizing. Can they actually make her go back? Archer asked. Technically, yes. If formal charges are filed in Illinois and they request extradition, Montana would have to comply. But, Webb held up a hand, that's a complicated process, expensive, time-consuming. They'd have to prove actual theft occurred, and more importantly, they'd have to prove it's worth the cost of pursuing across state lines. So what do? We respond. Strongly. Webb pulled out paper and began drafting. We state that Mrs. Rowan disputes the claim entirely, that the money in question represented earned wages withheld by her employer, and that she's prepared to provide testimony to that effect. We also point out that she's now a married woman residing in Montana with legal representation, and any further harassment will be met with counterclaims. What kind of counterclaims? Josephine asked. Defamation, malicious prosecution, whatever makes them think twice. Webb looked at her seriously. But I need you to be honest with me. Is there anything else? Anything they could use against you that we haven't discussed? Josephine was quiet for a long moment. Archer could see her weighing something, deciding how much truth to reveal. I saw things, she said finally, while I worked there. Mr. Whitmore entertained certain clients, important men, politicians, businessmen, and sometimes those entertainments were inappropriate. I kept my mouth shut, but he knew I saw. I think that's why he's pushing this so hard. Not because of the money, because he wants to make sure I stay quiet. Webb's expression didn't change, but his pen moved faster across the paper. Did you keep any documentation? Names, dates, anything? No. I was too scared. I just wanted to leave. All right, then we don't mention it. We stick to the wage dispute and leave it at that. He finished writing and reviewed his work. I'll send this today. In the meantime, you two should prepare for the possibility that someone might actually come here. A private investigator, maybe, or a lawyer trying to intimidate you in person. Let them come, Archer said. Easy to say now. Harder when they're standing on your property making threats. Webb handed him the draft letter. But for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Montana doesn't take kindly to Eastern money throwing its weight around. You've got more support here than you realize. They rode home in silence. Daniel had stayed with the Hendersons again, so it was just the two of them in the wagon. The sky was overcast, threatening rain that wouldn't come for hours yet. I'm sorry, Josephine said finally. For what? For bringing this into your life, into Daniel's life. You didn't sign up for this when you sent for a mail-order bride. I signed up for whatever came with you. That's how this works. But it's not fair. Fair doesn't enter into it. Archer kept his eyes on the road. Life isn't fair. My brother dying and leaving a kid behind wasn't fair. You having to run from some bastard in Chicago wasn't fair. But we deal with what we've got, and right now what we've got is each other. She was quiet for a mile. Then, I'm scared. I know. What if they make me go back? What if I have to stand in front of a judge and explain everything, and nobody believes me? Then I'll be there, testifying that you're a woman of good character, that you work harder than anyone I've ever known, that you've built a home here. He glanced at her. And if they still don't believe you, we'll figure something else out. But I'm not letting them drag you away without a fight. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why are you doing all this for me? Archer didn't have a simple answer, couldn't point to one reason. It was the way she'd looked getting off that train, broken but standing. The way she'd scrubbed floors like her life depended on it. The way she'd made Daniel laugh for the first time in months. The way she moved through the house at dawn, believing in new beginnings when everything in her past told her not to. Because you're my wife, he said finally, and because you deserve better than what you got. When they arrived home, the house felt different, emptier without Daniel's noise. Josephine went straight to the kitchen and started preparing dinner, even though it was barely 4 in the afternoon. You don't have to cook right now, Archer said. I need to do something with my hands, or I'll go crazy. He understood that. He took himself out to the barn and started tasks that didn't need doing, reorganizing tack, sweeping floors, checking fences that had already been checked, anything to keep moving, to keep the worry at bay. When he came back inside, the smell of bread baking filled the house. Josephine had made soup too, thick with vegetables from her garden. They ate without much conversation, the weight of the letter sitting between them like an uninvited guest. After dinner, Josephine washed dishes while Archer pretended to read the week-old newspaper. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. "I should tell you about him," Josephine said suddenly. "About Whitmore. About what happened." "You don't have to." "I think I do. If we're going to fight this, you should know what we're fighting." Archer set the paper aside. "All right." She dried her hands on her apron, then came to sit across from him at the table. For a moment, she just looked at her hands, gathering her thoughts. "I started working at his restaurant when I was 22. Cooking, mostly, but sometimes serving when they were short-staffed. The pay was terrible, but it was work, and I needed work." She paused. "My parents had died the year before. Influenza. I had no other family, no skills except cooking and sewing. So when Whitmore offered me a position, I took it." "How'd you end up living there?" "He had rooms above the restaurant, said it was easier having staff close by. I thought it was generous." She laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid." "You were young and alone. That's not stupid." "Maybe. Anyway, for the first year it was fine. I worked, I saved money, I stayed out of everyone's way. Then Whitmore's wife died, cancer, and everything changed. He started paying more attention to me, complimenting my cooking, giving me extra responsibilities, better pay." She met Archer's eyes. "I thought he was being kind. I didn't realize he was grooming me." Archer's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "He started asking me to serve at private dinners. Just him and important guests. Politicians, railroad men, people with money and power. The dinners would go late, and he'd send the other staff home and ask me to stay. To clean up, he said. To help him entertain." Her voice went flat. "Eventually he made it clear what he wanted, what he expected in exchange for the job, the room, the money. And you refused." "Not at first." She looked away. "I was terrified of being on the street again, of having nowhere to go. So I let him think I might eventually agree. I played along just enough to keep my position while I saved every penny I could. It took 18 months to get enough for a train ticket and some security. When I finally had it, I left in the middle of the night, took my wages from the lockbox in his office, the exact amount he owed me, no more, and disappeared." "How do you know you took the money?" "He must have realized immediately. Maybe he checked the box the next morning. Maybe one of the other staff told him they saw me near his office." She rubbed her temples. "I don't know. But within a week, he'd reported it stolen, said I was a thief who'd run off with his money. By then I was already in Montana, already answering your advertisement." "Jesus, Josephine. I know. I should have told you all this before we married, but I was afraid you'd send me away." "I wouldn't have. You say that now. But if you'd known about the accusations, the possibility of legal trouble, I still wouldn't have." Archer leaned forward. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who survived, who escaped a bad situation and built something better. That's not shameful, that's strength." Her eyes glistened. "I don't feel strong. Strength never does. That's how you know it's real." They sat in the quiet house, the lamplight casting soft shadows. Outside, wind moved through the grass. The first drops of rain started tapping against the windows. "What if they win?" Josephine asked. "What if they force me back and I end up in jail?" "They won't. You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise I won't let it happen without exhausting every option first." He reached across the table, palm up. After a moment, she placed her hand in his. "We've got Webb. We've got your testimony. We've got the fact that you're a married woman with a home and a family here. That counts for something. I hope you're right." "So do I." The rain picked up, drumming harder against the roof. Archer thought about going out to check on the animals, but the barn was secure and they'd weather the storm fine. Instead, he sat there holding his wife's hand, trying to offer comfort he wasn't entirely sure he could provide. "Archer?" Josephine's voice was small. "Yeah? I'm glad I came here. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. These past months have been the most stable I've felt in years. Maybe ever. Even with all the legal trouble? Even with that." She squeezed his hand. "Because I'm not facing it alone." They stayed at the table until the rain turned into a full storm, lightning illuminating the windows and thunder shaking the walls. Eventually, Josephine stood, yawning. "I should sleep. Long day tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" Everything, the same as every day. She paused at the base of the stairs. Will you be all right down here? It was a strange question until Archer realized what she was really asking. Was he afraid of the storm, the threats, the uncertainty ahead? I'll be fine, he said. You? I think so. For tonight, anyway. She climbed the stairs, and Archer listened to her moving around in her room above him. He thought about what she'd told him, about Whitmore and the private dinners and the slow manipulation that had trapped her. Thought about how brave she'd been to run, to start over, to risk building something new, even knowing it could all collapse. He thought about his brother, too, about the promises Archer had made at the graveside, to take care of Daniel, to keep the ranch running, to honor Thomas's memory. Somehow Josephine had become part of that promise, part of the family he was trying to protect and preserve. When he finally went to bed, he lay awake listening to the storm. Somewhere around midnight, he heard footsteps on the stairs. His door opened slightly. Archer? Josephine's silhouette in the doorway. What's wrong? Nothing. I heard something outside. He sat up, listening. Over the sound of rain, he heard it too. Horses. Multiple horses moving slowly past the house. Stay here, he said, pulling on pants and grabbing the rifle from beside his bed. I'm coming with you. Josephine, I'm coming with you. There was no point arguing. They moved downstairs together, Archer in front with the rifle. Through the window, they could see shapes in the darkness. 3 riders, maybe 4, moving toward the barn. Could be someone needing shelter from the storm, Archer said, but he didn't believe it. Not at midnight, not moving that carefully. He opened the front door just as one of the riders dismounted. Lightning flashed, and in that brief illumination, Archer saw a well-dressed man in a coat, too expensive for Montana, water streaming off his hat. Mr. Rowan? The man had an Eastern accent. Chicago, probably. Who's asking? My name is Frederick Nash. I'm a private investigator hired by Mr. Charles Whitmore to locate Josephine Hale. The man's eyes moved past Archer to where Josephine stood in the doorway. I believe you have information about her whereabouts. She's not Josephine Hale anymore, Archer said. She's Josephine Rowan, my wife, and you're trespassing. Nash smiled, but there was no warmth in it. So she's here. Excellent. That saves us all considerable time. He gestured to the other riders. These gentlemen are witnesses to our encounter. I'm here to formally notify Mrs. Rowan that charges have been filed in Chicago for theft of property valued at $600. She's required to return to Illinois to answer these charges. She's not going anywhere. I'm afraid that's not your decision, Mr. Rowan. The law is quite clear. Montana law is clear, Archer interrupted. And Montana law says you need a warrant to make demands like that. You have a warrant, Mr. Nash? The investigator's smile faltered. I'm working to obtain... Then you've got nothing, and you're still trespassing. Archer raised the rifle slightly, not pointing it, just making its presence clear. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horses and ride to town. You want to talk to my wife, you do it through our lawyer, Marcus Webb. You try to approach her directly again. I'll have the sheriff arrest you for harassment. Mr. Rowan, I don't think you understand the seriousness. I understand perfectly. Some rich man in Chicago is mad his employee got away, so he's sending hired muscle to intimidate her into coming back. Well, she's not going back. She's got a home here, a family here, and legal protection here. So unless you've got something official, something with a judge's signature on it, you need to leave. Nash stared at him for a long moment. Rain streamed between them. Finally, the investigator pulled something from his coat, a folded document. This is a civil summons requiring Mrs. Rowan to appear in Chicago within 30 days to answer the charges against her. Failure to appear will result in a warrant for her arrest and extradition proceedings. He held it out. I'm authorized to serve this directly. Archer took the document without lowering the rifle. Fine. It's served. Now get off my property. Mr. Rowan, I should warn you that interfering with... I'm not interfering with anything. I'm a man standing on his own porch, asking uninvited guests to leave. You want to make something of that? We can discuss it with the sheriff, who happens to be a friend of mine. Your choice. Nash mounted his horse, water splashing. This isn't over. It is for tonight. The riders turned and headed back down the road toward town. Archer stood on the porch until their shapes disappeared into the rain-soaked darkness. Then he looked at the document in his hand. "What does it say?" Josephine asked from the doorway. He unfolded it, trying to read in the lamplight. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Josephine was being sued in civil court for theft and required to appear in Chicago within 30 days. It's a summons. Civil, not criminal. That's something, at least. He handed it to her. "But we need to get this to Webb first thing in the morning." Josephine read it, her face pale. 30 days. That's not much time. It's enough. For what? For us to build a defense, to gather evidence that you earned that money legitimately, to show you're a Montana resident now, married and settled, and that this is nothing but harassment from a vindictive former employer. He took the summons back. "We're not giving up, Josephine. This is just their first move." She nodded, but he could see the fear in her eyes. They went back inside, locking the door behind them. Neither of them would sleep much that night, but at least they were inside together, dry. "I should have run further," Josephine said, sitting at the kitchen table. "California, maybe. Somewhere he'd never find me." "And then what? Spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder? That's not living. That's just surviving scared." "Maybe scared is all I deserve." "Stop that." Archer sat across from her. "You deserve a life, a real one, and we're going to fight for it. I don't know how to fight men like Whitmore, men with money and power and connections. You don't have to know. That's why we've got Webb. That's why we've got neighbors who'll vouch for you. That's why you've got me." He reached for her hand again. "You think I'm going to let some Chicago peacock take my wife away? Not happening." Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Your wife. You say that like it means something." "It does mean something." "Does it? We barely know each other, Archer. We married for practical reasons. Maybe it started practical, but it's becoming something else. You must feel it too." She looked at their joined hands. "I do. And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because everything I care about gets taken away. My parents, my job, my safety, everything." Her voice cracked. I can't lose this too. I can't lose you and Daniel. I wouldn't survive it." "Then don't lose us. Stay and fight." "What if fighting isn't enough?" "Then we'll have tried." "That's more than most people can say." They sat in the lamplight, holding hands across the kitchen table, two people trying to believe their own brave words. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside there was warmth and light, and the fragile beginning of something that felt like hope. Morning came gray and wet. The rain had stopped, but the sky threatened more. Archer rode to the Hendersons to collect Daniel while Josephine started breakfast. When they returned, the boy was full of questions about the storm, the thunder, whether any trees had fallen. "Did you see the lightning, Uncle Archer? Mrs. Henderson said it hit their old oak tree." "I saw plenty of lightning, enough to last me a while." They ate together, and Archer watched Josephine move through the morning routine. She was quieter than usual, but she smiled at Daniel's stories and made sure he ate enough. To anyone who didn't know her, she'd seem fine, but Archer saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly when she poured coffee. After breakfast, they drove to town to see Webb. The lawyer read the summons carefully, then read it again. "This is actually good news," he said finally. "How is this good news?" Josephine asked. "Because it's civil, not criminal. They're not accusing you of a crime. They're suing you for money. That's a much lower bar, much easier to defend against." Webb set the document down. "And the fact that they sent a private investigator instead of working through proper channels tells me they're not as confident in their case as they want you to believe." "So what do? We file a response. We dispute the claim. We countersue for harassment and defamation, and we request the case be moved to Montana jurisdiction since you're a resident here now." Webb started making notes. "It'll take time, but that works in our favor. The longer this drags out, the more it costs Whitmore. Eventually he'll realize it's not worth the expense." "You don't know him," Josephine said. "He doesn't care about expense. He cares about control, about making sure I don't talk about what I saw." Webb looked up sharply. "What you saw?" "Doesn't matter. I'm not talking. I just want to be left alone." "Josephine," Webb said carefully, "if you have information about illegal activities, that could be leverage. It could make him drop the whole thing. Or it could make him come after me harder. Rich men don't like being threatened. No, but they like being exposed even less. Archer watched the exchange, saw Josephine weighing her options. She was scared, legitimately scared, and he couldn't blame her. Whatever she'd witnessed in Chicago, it was enough to make her risk everything to get away. Let's just focus on defending against the summons, Archer said. One problem at a time. Webb nodded. All right, I'll draft the response today and file it by end of week. In the meantime, I need both of you to write down everything you remember. Josephine, document your employment, dates, duties, any conversation about wages. Archer, document the marriage, Josephine's integration into the community, her work on the ranch. We need to build a picture of her as a legitimate resident with a legitimate life here. They spent the next 2 hours in Webb's office, writing out timelines and details. By the time they finished, Archer's hand was cramping and Josephine looked exhausted. Good work, Webb said, reviewing their notes. This gives me plenty to work with. Now go home, try to relax, and let me handle the legal machinery. That's easier said than done, Josephine muttered. I know, but worrying won't change anything. Focus on your life, your family. Let me worry about Whitmore. They drove home in afternoon sunlight that had finally broken through the clouds. The land sparkled, washed clean by the storm. It should have felt hopeful, but Archer couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for another shoe to drop. That evening, after Daniel was in bed, Archer found Josephine in the garden pulling weeds that didn't need pulling. You're going to work yourself into the ground, he said. Better than sitting still. Come sit with me, just for a minute. She followed him to the porch, and they sat on the steps watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and pink, colors too beautiful for the worry sitting in both their chests. I keep thinking about what Webb said, Josephine said finally. About leverage, about using what I know. And I don't know if I'm brave enough to do it, to stand up in front of people and testify about what I saw, about the things Whitmore did. What did he do? Exactly. I don't know if you could prove that legally. The girls technically chose to be there, but the choice was between that or starving on the streets. Some choice. Her voice hardened. I tried to help one once. A girl named Sarah, 15 years old, skinny as a rail, terrified. I gave her money, told her how to get to a women's shelter I knew about. She ran. Whitmore found out I'd helped her. That's when things got bad for me. When he started making demands, pushing harder, I think he wanted to punish me. Jesus, Josephine. So now you know. Now you know what kind of man we're fighting. And you understand why I don't want to testify, don't want to draw more attention, because men like that don't just go away quietly. Archer thought about the investigators showing up in the middle of the night, about the summons, the threats, the careful escalation. Whitmore wasn't just trying to get his money back. He was sending a message. Stay quiet or face consequences. We're still not backing down, Archer said. Even knowing all this? Especially knowing all this. He looked at her directly. Men like Whitmore count on people being too scared to fight back. That's how they keep getting away with it. But you're not alone anymore. You've got me, you've got Daniel, you've got this community, and we're not going to let him win. You say that now, but what if he comes after you, after Daniel? Then he'll learn that Montana's different from Chicago. We protect our own out here. Josephine leaned against his shoulder, a small gesture, but significant. They sat together as darkness fell, two people bound by circumstance and choice, trying to believe they were strong enough for what was coming. I'm tired of being scared, she said quietly. I know. I want to fight back. I want to tell the truth about what he is, what he does, but I don't know how. We'll figure it out together. You keep saying that word, together, because it's true. That's what we are now, what we've built. He put his arm around her shoulders. You're not facing this alone, Josephine, not anymore. She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were wet. Why do you care so much? Because... He stopped, realizing the truth of what he was about to say. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being an arrangement and started being a marriage. A real one. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone hurt my wife. She kissed him then. Not the careful peck on the cheek from before, but a real kiss. Desperate and grateful and full of things neither of them had words for. Archer kissed her back, one hand cupping her face, and for a moment the fear and worry and legal troubles faded away. When they finally pulled apart, Both of them were breathing hard. "I don't know what I'm doing," Josephine whispered. "Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. Together? Together." They sat on the porch until the stars came out, holding each other in the Montana darkness. Two broken people who'd somehow found a way to be whole. That kiss changed things between them, though neither spoke about it directly. The next morning, Josephine made breakfast as always, but when she handed Archer his coffee, their fingers touched and held for just a moment longer than necessary. Daniel noticed, looking between them with a small smile he tried to hide behind his eggs. "What?" Archer asked. "Nothing," the boy said, but his grin widened. "You're terrible at lying, Dan. You're both acting weird. In a good way." He shoveled another bite. "Mrs. Henderson says married people are supposed to act like that." "And what does Mrs. Henderson know?" Josephine asked, but her cheeks were pink. "She says you and Uncle Archer got married for practical reasons, but that doesn't mean you can't fall in love for real." Daniel said it matter-of-factly, like he was reporting the weather. "She says sometimes the best marriages start backwards." Archer nearly choked on his coffee. Josephine turned toward the stove, suddenly very interested in the pan. "Mrs. Henderson talks too much," Archer managed. "She's usually right, though." There was no arguing with that. Mrs. Henderson had a way of seeing through people that was both irritating and oddly comforting. And maybe the kid had a point. Maybe they were doing this backwards. Marriage first, feelings second, but that didn't make it wrong. After breakfast, Archer headed out to check the cattle while Josephine worked in the garden. Daniel split his time between them, helping where he could, chattering about everything and nothing. The day felt almost normal, which made Archer nervous. Normal didn't last, not when there were legal threats hanging over them. Around noon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Archer's hand went automatically to the rifle he'd started carrying, but as the figure got closer, he recognized Sheriff Tom Bradley. The man was in his 50s, weathered and fair, someone who'd earned his badge through common sense rather than quick draws. "Tom," Archer greeted him. "What brings you out here?" Bradley dismounted, accepting the water Josephine brought without being asked. "Had a visit this morning. Fellow named Nash, private investigator from Chicago." "We've met," so he said. "Came to my office asking about you and your wife. Wanted to know if you had a reputation for violence, if there'd been any complaints about threatening behavior." Bradley drank deeply. "Told him I'd known you 5 years and you'd never caused a lick of trouble." "I appreciate that." "Didn't do it for you. Did it because Nash rubbed me the wrong way. Too slick. Too eager to paint you as some kind of dangerous frontier thug." The sheriff looked at Josephine. "He also asked about you, ma'am. Your character, your reputation in town." Josephine's face went pale. "And what did you say?" "Told him the truth. That you're a hard worker, that you've integrated well into the community, that the only complaints I've heard are from people jealous their own houses aren't as clean as yours." He handed back the cup. "But I'm guessing there's more to this story than a wage dispute." Archer and Josephine exchanged glances. Finally, Josephine nodded. "Sheriff, can this conversation stay confidential?" she asked. "Depends on what you tell me, but I'm inclined toward discretion where I can be." They went inside, and over coffee, Josephine told her story again. This time she included more details about Whitmore's operation, the young girls, the powerful men who visited. Bradley's expression darkened as he listened. "You witness any of this directly?" he asked when she finished. "Enough to know what was happening, not enough to testify in court probably. I was careful to never be in the room when transactions occurred." "Smart. Self-preservation." Bradley drummed his fingers on the table. "But here's the thing. What you're describing sounds like it might interest federal authorities. Interstate trafficking, corruption of public officials, that's bigger than a civil lawsuit over wages." "I don't want to be a witness in some federal case," Josephine said quickly. "I just want to be left alone." "Understood. But knowledge is leverage. And right now, Whitmore's got all the leverage. He's using the legal system to harass you, to scare you into silence. If he knew you were willing to talk to federal authorities, that might change his calculation." "Or it might make him come after us harder," Archer said. "Possible. But men like that usually fold when faced with real consequences. They're used to intimidating vulnerable women, not fighting federal charges." Bradley stood. "I'm not saying you should do anything, just saying you've got options. And if you need backup, legal or otherwise, you call on me. Montana looks after its own." After the sheriff left, Josephine sat at the table looking shaken. "He's right," Archer said. "About the leverage. I know. But using it means opening up everything, testifying, reliving all of it. And there's no guarantee it would even work. There's no guarantee anything will work. But sitting here waiting for Whitmore to make the next move isn't working either. So what do you suggest?" Archer thought about it. "We talk to Webb. Tell him everything. See if there's a way to use what you know without putting yourself in danger. And if there's not, then we decide how much we're willing to risk." He moved to sit beside her. "But whatever we decide together. I'm not making this choice for you." She reached for his hand. "I appreciate that. Most men wouldn't give me a choice." "I'm not most men." "No, you're not." She squeezed his fingers. "All right. We talk to Webb, we see what options we have. Then we decide." They made the trip to town the next day, bringing Daniel along rather than leaving him with neighbors again. The boy was starting to sense the tension, asking questions they couldn't quite answer. Webb listened to the full story with the same neutral expression he brought to all his cases. When Josephine finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "This changes things considerably," he said. "How so?" "Because you're not just defending against a civil suit anymore. You're a potential witness to federal crimes. That gives you protection you didn't have before." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "Here's what I propose. We draft a letter to Whitmore's attorneys stating that you're prepared to cooperate with any federal investigation into trafficking and corruption. We don't make specific allegations, but we make it clear you have information that could be of interest to authorities." "Won't that just make him angrier?" Josephine asked. "Probably. But it'll also make him think twice. Right now he sees you as an easy target. A lone woman he can bully into silence. If he knows you're willing to talk and that you have legal protection to do so, the cost-benefit analysis changes." "What about the civil suit, the summons?" "We respond to it as planned, but we also include notice that you're considering cooperation with federal authorities regarding your time in his employ. That puts him on notice that pursuing this could open doors he once kept closed." Webb looked at both of them. "It's a gamble, but doing nothing is also a gamble." Archer watched Josephine's face. She was scared. He could see it in the tension around her eyes, the way her jaw clenched. But underneath the fear was something else. Anger, maybe, or just exhaustion from running. "Do it," she said. "Draft the letter." "You're sure?" "No, but I'm tired of being scared. If this is the only way to stop him, then we try it." Webb wrote while they waited. The letter was precise and professional, laying out Josephine's position without making specific accusations. It mentioned her willingness to cooperate with any investigation, noted her legal representation, and firmly stated that she would not be returning to Chicago. "I'll send this today," Webb said. "Expect a response within 2 weeks. Could be they drop the whole thing, could be they escalate. Either way, you'll know where you stand." They left feeling oddly lighter despite the uncertainty. At least they were doing something instead of just waiting. On the ride home, Daniel asked the question they'd been dreading. "Are the bad people going to take Miss Josephine away?" Archer glanced at Josephine, who'd gone very still. "We're not going to let that happen," Archer said. "But what if they try?" "Then we'll stop them." "How?" It was a fair question. How did you stop people with money and power and the law on their side? Archer didn't have a good answer. "Sometimes you just have to stand your ground," he said finally, "even when you're scared, even when the odds are bad. You stand up and say, 'No, this is mine and you can't have it,' and sometimes that's enough." "Is it enough this time?" "I hope so, Dan. I really do." That night, after Daniel was asleep, Archer found Josephine sitting on the porch again. It was becoming her place, the spot where she went to think, to breathe, to process everything. "Room for one more?" he asked. "Always." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. The night was cool, stars brilliant overhead. Somewhere a coyote sang, lonely and wild. "Thank you," Josephine said quietly. "For what?" "For standing with me. For not sending me away when you found out how complicated this was." "Where would I send you? This is your home." "Is it?" She turned to look at him. "Really? Or is it just a place I'm staying until the next disaster?" "It's your home. Our home, you, me, and Daniel." He took her hand. "I know it started as an arrangement. I know we barely knew each other. But something's changed, at least for me. What's changed? Everything. Nothing. I don't know how to explain it. He struggled for words. When you first got here, I saw someone who could help with the ranch, with Daniel, someone practical and useful. But now when I look at you, I see... He stopped, afraid of saying too much. What do you see? Home. I see home. Her breath caught. In the starlight, her eyes shimmered. I see that too, she whispered. I see a life I never thought I could have. Stability, family, someone who actually gives a damn whether I live or die. She laughed, but it was wet. It terrifies me. Why? Because I'm going to lose it. I always lose everything good. It's just a matter of time before... Stop. He turned to face her fully. You're not going to lose this. We're not going to let Whitmore or anyone else take it away. And even if the worst happens, even if somehow you have to go back to Chicago, I'll be there, right beside you, fighting with you. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. That's what marriage means, not the piece of paper Webb filed. The choice to stand together no matter what comes. She was crying now, tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't deserve you. That's not your call to make. I chose you. You chose me. That's enough. She kissed him then, salt-wet and desperate, and Archer kissed her back like it was the only thing keeping either of them tethered to earth. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were shaking. Come to bed with me, Josephine said. Josephine, just to be close. I don't want to sleep alone tonight. I don't want to be alone at all anymore. They went upstairs together, moving quietly past Daniel's room. In Josephine's room, smaller than Archer's, but somehow more lived in. They lay down together on the narrow bed. Archer held her while she cried, stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances he hoped were true. Eventually, her breathing evened out. She fell asleep in his arms, one hand clutched in his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. Archer lay awake, listening to her breathe, feeling the weight and warmth of her against him. This was real. Whatever had started as practicality had become something else entirely, something worth fighting for. He must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, pale dawn light was filtering through the curtains, and Josephine was awake, watching him. Morning, she said softly. Morning. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in months. She traced his jaw with one finger. Thank you for staying. Nowhere else I'd rather be. They lay there for a few more minutes before reality intruded. Daniel would be awake soon, needing breakfast. The cattle needed checking. Life continued whether they were ready or not. But as they got up and started the day together, moving around each other in the small room, helping with buttons and laces, stealing small touches, Archer felt something settle in his chest. This was what he wanted, this quiet intimacy, this partnership, this woman who'd shown up half dead and somehow brought his whole life back to living. Over the next week, they fell into a new rhythm. Josephine still slept in her room, but most nights Archer joined her, holding her until she fell asleep, then slipping back to his own bed before Daniel woke. It was an unspoken arrangement, one they never discussed but both needed. During the day, they worked as always, but there were more touches now, more casual affection. A hand on the small of her back as he passed, her fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee. Small things that added up to something significant. Daniel noticed, of course. The kid missed nothing. You're happier, he said to Archer one afternoon while they were mending fence. Am I? Yeah, you smile more. You don't look so worried all the time. Things are better. Because of Miss Josephine? Yeah, because of her. Good. Daniel hammered a nail with more force than necessary. I was worried you'd be sad forever, like after Papa died. Archer's throat tightened. I'm not sad anymore, Dan. Me neither. Not as much, anyway. The boy looked at him seriously. Is she staying? For real? That's the plan. What if the bad people try to take her? Then we stop them. Promise? Promise. The letter from Whitmore's attorneys arrived 12 days after Webb sent his. Archer saw the Chicago postmark and felt his stomach drop. They opened it together in Webb's office, Josephine's hand gripping Archer's so hard his fingers went numb. The response was terse and aggressive. Whitmore denied any wrongdoing, characterized Josephine's accusations as slanderous fabrications, and doubled down on the civil suit. However, and this was the important part, they were willing to settle. If Josephine returned the full $600 plus interest and signed a non-disclosure agreement, they would drop all charges. "They're scared," Webb said immediately. "How do you figure?" Archer asked. "Because they're offering a settlement. If they had a strong case, they'd push forward with the suit. This offer tells me they don't want this going to trial, don't want discovery, don't want anything that might expose what really happened." He set the letter down. "They want her silence, and they're willing to pay for it." $600 plus interest, Josephine said. "That's more than $800 total. I don't have that kind of money." "Doesn't matter. We're not accepting anyway." "We're not?" "No, because accepting means admitting guilt, signing away your rights, and giving them exactly what they want." Webb pulled out paper and started drafting. "We counteroffer. You'll return the $240 you actually took, your earned wages, if they drop all charges and agree to a mutual non-disclosure agreement that prevents them from ever contacting you or speaking about you again." "They'll never accept that," Josephine said. "Maybe not. But it puts the ball back in their court, and every time they respond, every time they engage, it costs them money and time. Eventually, the math stops making sense. And if they don't care about the math, then we go to trial, and I destroy them in front of a Montana jury." Webb smiled grimly. "Trust me, Mrs. Rowan. 12 people from this county are going to be far more sympathetic to a hardworking woman defending herself than to some rich Chicago businessman trying to get richer." They sent the counteroffer that day. Then they waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Days stretched into weeks with no response. Josephine threw herself into work with manic energy, expanding the garden, reorganizing the entire house, sewing new clothes for Daniel, who was growing faster than they could keep up with. She was a whirlwind of activity, never still, never resting. "You're going to work yourself sick," Archer said one evening, finding her in the garden well after sunset, still pulling weeds by moonlight. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted. I have to stay busy. If I stop, I start thinking. And if I start thinking—" Her voice broke. Archer knelt beside her in the dirt. "Come inside. It's late." I can't stop. Because if I stop working, if I stop being useful, then what's the point of fighting so hard to stay?" "The point is you belong here. Not because you work hard. Because you're part of this family." "But what if—" "No what ifs. Come inside. Rest. Let me take care of you for once." She let him pull her to her feet. Inside, he drew water for washing, heated soup she'd made earlier, made her sit and eat. She protested weakly, but obeyed, too tired to fight. After dinner, she fell asleep on the couch before she could make it upstairs. Archer carried her to bed, his bed this time, bigger and more comfortable. He tucked her in and was about to leave when her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "Stay," she mumbled, half asleep. "I'm right here." "No, stay. In bed. With me." So he did. He climbed in beside her, still fully clothed, and she immediately curled into him. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into sleep. Archer lay awake, one arm around his wife, and thought about how much had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been alone with a silent boy and a failing ranch, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Now he had this, a woman sleeping trustingly in his arms, a boy finding his voice again, a home that felt like more than just shelter. He'd fight for this, whatever it took. The response came 5 weeks after their counteroffer. Archer was in the barn when Josephine came running, waving an envelope. "They accepted," she said, breathless. "Webb just sent word. They accepted our terms." Archer grabbed her, lifting her off her feet. "They what?" "They'll drop everything if I return the $240, and we both sign non-disclosure agreements. It's over, Archer. It's actually over." They spun in the barn, laughing like idiots. Daniel heard the commotion and came running, and soon all 3 of them were celebrating, dancing in the dusty afternoon light. "Does this mean the bad people are gone?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, Dan, they're gone." "Forever?" "Forever." The paperwork was finalized within a week. Josephine scraped together the $240 from her savings and what Archer contributed. She insisted on paying every penny herself, said it was important, and Webb handled the rest. The signed agreements came back, legally binding, and that was it. Josephine was free. The night after everything was finalized, they celebrated with a dinner that Josephine actually enjoyed instead of picking at nervously. She laughed at Daniel's stories, drank wine that Henderson had gifted them, looked lighter than Archer had ever seen her. After Daniel went to bed, they sat on the porch together. The night was warm, crickets singing their endless song. "I can't believe it's really over," Josephine said. "Believe it. Part of me keeps waiting for another letter, another threat. There won't be one. It's done." She leaned against him and he put his arm around her shoulders. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead. "Archer?" she said eventually. "Yeah?" "When we got married, you said it was practical. A way to protect me legally." "I remember." "Is that still what this is?" He knew what she was really asking. Knew this was the moment to be honest or lose the chance forever. "No," he said. "It stopped being practical a long time ago." "When?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe when you made those curtains for Daniel. Maybe when you stood up to that investigator. Maybe the first time I saw you laugh." He tilted her chin up so she had to look at him. "All I know is somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. And I don't know what to do about it except tell you and hope you feel the same." Her eyes were wet. "You love me?" "Yeah, I do. Even though I came here broken, even though I brought trouble and danger and legal nightmares, because of all that, because you survived it and came out stronger, because you built a home here with nothing but determination and stubborn hope." He wiped a tear from her cheek. "You're the strongest person I know, Josephine, and I love you." She kissed him then, not desperate this time, but sure and steady. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to say it." "You're not scared now?" "Terrified. But I'm saying it anyway." They went to bed together that night, really together, no hesitation, no holding back. And in the dark warmth of their room, they made promises without words, sealed their commitment in ways that had nothing to do with legal documents. Later, as Josephine slept in his arms, Archer thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate advertisement. A woman who'd looked half dead stepping off a train. Months of careful circling, testing, learning to trust. Legal threats and midnight confrontations, and the slow realization that what they'd built mattered. Outside, Montana stretched vast and indifferent under endless stars. The land didn't care about their struggles, their victories, their love. It just existed, demanding everything and offering nothing but the chance to try. And that was enough. More than enough. Archer closed his eyes and let himself believe finally that good things could last. That happiness wasn't just a temporary respite between disasters. That sometimes people found exactly what they needed in the last place they expected to look. Beside him, Josephine murmured in her sleep and pressed closer. He tightened his arm around her and drifted off, content in a way he'd never been before. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and all the normal struggles of ranch life. But they'd face it together, husband and wife, partners in every sense, building something lasting from the wreckage of their pasts. And that, Archer thought as sleep finally took him, was worth every fight they'd endured to get here. The seasons changed the way they always did in Montana, gradually, then all at once. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's crispness, and the land turned gold and amber under skies so blue they hurt to look at. Josephine's garden yielded more than they could eat, so she started preserving, canning vegetables, drying herbs, making jams that lined the shelves in neat, colorful rows. "We'll never eat all this," Archer said, watching her work through another batch of tomatoes. "You say that now. Wait until February when fresh food is a memory and all we've got is what we put up." She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Besides, I like knowing we're prepared, that we won't go hungry no matter what winter brings." It wasn't really about the food, Archer understood. It was about control. After months of feeling powerless against Whitmore's threats, Josephine needed to control something. If that something was rows of preserved vegetables, so be it. Daniel helped with the harvest, hauling baskets and learning which plants were ready and which needed more time. He'd grown 3 inches since spring, filling out in the shoulders, losing some of that hollow look he'd carried since his father's death. He laughed easily now, spoke freely, even argued sometimes, normal kid stuff that made Archer's chest ache with relief. "Uncle Archer says we might get snow before Halloween," Daniel announced one afternoon, arms full of squash. "That's early," Josephine said. He says Montana weather doesn't follow rules. It does what it wants. The boy set his burden down carefully. Kind of like you. Josephine looked up sharply, then saw his grin. You're getting too smart for your own good. That's what Uncle Archer says, too. Well, Uncle Archer's right about that. But she was smiling. They worked until the sun dropped low, then headed inside for dinner. The house had transformed over the months, no longer the chaotic bachelor dwelling Archer had maintained, but a real home. Curtains in every window, rugs on the floors, pictures on the walls, including one of Thomas that Josephine had found and framed. She'd done it without asking, just set it on the mantel one day, like it had always belonged there. You didn't have to do that, Archer had said when he first saw it. Yes, I did. He was Daniel's father, your brother. He deserves to be remembered. It was one of 100 small kindnesses she'd woven into their lives. Things Archer hadn't known he needed until they were there. That evening, after Daniel was asleep, Archer found Josephine at the kitchen table with pen and paper, doing calculations. What are you figuring? He asked. Money. The ranch produced more this year than last. Between the cattle and the garden, we actually made a profit. She showed him the numbers. Not much, but enough to think about expanding. Expanding how? More chickens. Maybe some pigs. I've been reading about crop rotation. We could use the south field for wheat next year, let the soil recover. Her eyes were bright with planning. We could build this into something bigger, something that lasts. Archer sat down beside her, studying her careful notations. You've put a lot of thought into this. I have time to think now that I'm not looking over my shoulder every minute. She set the pen down. I want to build something here, Archer, something permanent, not just survive, but actually thrive. Then that's what we'll do. Just like that? Just like that, you've got good ideas. Better than mine, honestly. And you work harder than anyone I know. He took her hand. This is your ranch as much as mine now. Maybe more, considering how much you've improved it. It's our ranch, she corrected. Everything we build together. Yeah, together. They sat in the lamplight, planning their future, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. A year ago, Archer had been going through the motions, surviving but not living. Now he had purpose, partnership, hope. The first snow came in late October, just like Archer had predicted. Not enough to stick, just a dusting that melted by noon. But it was a warning. Winter was coming, and Montana winters didn't mess around. They spent November preparing. Archer reinforced the barn, stocked hay, made sure every fence was solid. Josephine preserved the last of the garden, organized their supplies, sewed warmer clothes for Daniel. They worked with quiet urgency, racing the weather. The first real storm hit 2 weeks before Christmas. Snow came down thick and fast, piling up against the house, turning the world white and silent. They were snowed in for 3 days, which should have been miserable but somehow wasn't. Daniel played in the drifts, building snow forts and pelting Archer with snowballs. Josephine made soup that lasted all 3 days, bread that filled the house with warmth and yeast smell. At night they sat by the fire, reading or talking or just being together. I like this, Daniel said on the third night, nestled between them on the couch. Like what? Josephine asked. Being stuck together feels like a real family. We are a real family, Archer said. I know, but sometimes I forget, and then something happens, and I remember. The boy yawned. I'm glad Miss Josephine stayed. Me too, Dan. Me too. After the boy went to bed, Archer and Josephine sat by the dying fire. Outside, wind howled and snow kept falling. Inside, everything was warm and safe. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Josephine asked. How so? If I hadn't answered your advertisement, if you'd chosen someone else, if I'd run to California instead of Montana. She stared into the flames. All the tiny choices that led us here. I think about it sometimes, but then I stop because it doesn't matter. We're here now. That's what counts. Are you happy? The question was quiet, almost hesitant. Yeah, happier than I've been in years, maybe ever. He pulled her closer. Are you? Yes. Even when I'm scared or worried or exhausted, underneath all that, there's this foundation of happiness I didn't know I could have. She looked at him. You gave me that. You and Daniel. You gave it to yourself. We just gave you space to find it. Maybe. Or maybe we gave it to each other. She kissed him softly. Either way, I'm keeping it. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. They made love by the firelight, slow and tender, then fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in blankets. When Archer woke before dawn, stiff and cold, he carried Josephine upstairs to their bed and held her until morning light crept through the curtains. Christmas came quiet and small. They couldn't get to town for supplies, so Josephine improvised. She made cookies from their stores, sewed Daniel a new shirt from fabric she'd been saving. Archer carved the boy a wooden horse, spending late nights in the barn working by lamplight. On Christmas morning, Daniel woke them early, practically vibrating with excitement. They opened their small gifts by the fire, and the boy's joy made it feel like abundance. "This is the best Christmas ever," he declared, clutching his wooden horse. "Better than last year?" Archer asked. Daniel's face went serious. "Last year, Papa had just died. We didn't really celebrate. It was just sad." He looked at Josephine. "This year is different. This year we're a family again." Josephine's eyes filled. She pulled the boy into a hug, and Archer wrapped his arms around both of them. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other against the cold world outside. Later, while Daniel played with his new horse, Josephine pulled Archer aside. "I have something for you," she said, handing him a small package wrapped in cloth. Inside was a leather journal, hand-bound, with his initials carved into the cover. "I thought you could write down ranch records," she said. "Keep track of what works, what doesn't. Build a history." She paused. "Daniel should know his father's legacy, should know what you're building for him." Archer's throat was tight. Thank you. There's more." She opened the journal to the first page, where she'd written in careful script, "The Rowan Ranch, established 1881, built by Thomas Rowan, maintained by Archer Rowan and Josephine Rowan, for Daniel Rowan and all who come after." "All who come after?" Archer asked. She blushed. "Well, I thought, eventually, there might be more children, if you wanted, if we—" She stopped, flustered. Archer kissed her, deep and sure. "I want everything with you. More kids, more years, all of it. Even though I come with complications? Especially because of that. Nothing worth having is simple." She laughed, relief and joy mixed together. "We're really doing this, aren't we? Building a life." "Yeah, we really are." The winter passed in a blur of work and weather. Some days were hard, bitter cold that made every task a challenge, supplies running lower than comfortable, Josephine's lungs struggling with the dry indoor air. But they managed. They helped each other through the hard days and celebrated the good ones. In February, Daniel turned 7. They made a cake with their dwindling sugar stores and sang to him. The boy made a wish and blew out the candles in one breath. "What'd you wish for?" Josephine asked. "Can't tell, or it won't come true." But he was grinning. "Let me guess," Archer said. "A pony?" "Nope." "A new rifle?" "Nope." "Then what?" Daniel looked between them. "I wished for a baby brother or sister, so I'm not the only kid anymore." Josephine choked on her cake. Archer nearly dropped his fork. Dan, that's not really something you can wish for," Archer managed. "Why not? Mrs. Henderson says married people have babies. You're married, so it makes sense." "It's more complicated than that," Josephine said, face red. "Is it? You love each other. You share a bed. Mrs. Henderson says that's how it works." "Mrs. Henderson," Archer said carefully, "talks too much." But Daniel's wish lodged in both their minds. That night, lying in bed, Josephine brought it up. "Would you want that? Another child? Would you?" "I asked first." Archer thought about it. "Yeah, I think I would. Not right away, maybe, but eventually, if you wanted." "I'm not sure I'd be a good mother. I don't know anything about babies." "You're amazing with Daniel." "Daniel was already 6 when I got here. Babies are different. So we'd learn. Together. Like we learn everything else." He rolled to face her. "But only if you want to. No pressure." She was quiet for a long time. "I think I do want it. Someday. The idea of bringing a child into the world, into this home we've built. It feels right. Then someday we will." They fell asleep holding each other, dreaming of futures that felt possible now in ways they never had before. Spring came late that year, snow lingering into April. But when it finally arrived, it came with a rush. Grass greening almost overnight, flowers exploding in Josephine's garden beds, newborn calves wobbling on uncertain legs. The ranch thrived. Archer expanded the herd with the profit from last year. Josephine started her crop rotation plan, planting wheat in the south field. Daniel helped with everything, growing stronger and more capable by the day. In May, Sheriff Bradley stopped by with news. "Thought you'd want to know," he said, accepting coffee. "Got word from Chicago. Charles Whitmore was arrested 2 weeks ago." Josephine's cup clattered against her saucer. "What?" "Federal charges, trafficking, corruption, whole list of things. Turns out you weren't the only one willing to talk once they had protection. 3 other women came forward, and they had documentation. He's looking at serious prison time. But we signed a non-disclosure agreement," Josephine said. "You did." "But they didn't. And once the feds got involved, your agreement didn't matter anyway. You're not required to testify or anything. They've got plenty without you." Bradley set his cup down. "Thought you'd want to know he can't hurt you anymore. Or anyone else." After the sheriff left, Josephine sat very still. "You all right?" Archer asked. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel relieved. And I do, but also—" She struggled for words. "I spent so long being afraid of him, afraid he'd find me, hurt me, destroy what I'd built here. And now he's just gone. Powerless. That's good, isn't it? It's strange, like I've been carrying this weight so long I forgot what it feels like without it." She took a shaky breath. "Do you think those other women, the ones who testified, do you think they're safe now?" Bradley said they're in protection, and with Whitmore facing decades in prison, they should be. "I should have been braver. Should have testified when Webb first suggested it. You were brave enough. You survived. You escaped. You built a new life." Archer took her hands. "Not everyone has to be a hero, Josephine. Sometimes just living well is victory enough." She nodded slowly, letting that truth settle in. "I'm glad it's over. Really over this time. So am I." They didn't talk about it after that. There was work to do, life to live. The past was past, and the future was waiting. Summer brought growth. The wheat came in better than expected, golden and thick. The cattle were healthy, calves strong. Josephine's garden produced abundance, and this time she knew exactly how to preserve it. But the biggest change came in August. Josephine had been feeling off for weeks, tired, nauseous in the mornings, emotional in ways that weren't like her. She insisted it was just the heat, the work, nothing to worry about. Until Mrs. Henderson came to visit and took one look at her. "You're pregnant," the older woman said flatly. I can't be." "You can be and you are. I've had 6 babies, girl. I know the signs." Mrs. Henderson's face softened. "How late are you?" 2 months, maybe? I thought it was just stress." "It's a baby. Congratulations." After Mrs. Henderson left, Josephine sat at the kitchen table in shock. Archer found her there when he came in from the fields. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped, then started again, brighter. "You're... really?" "Mrs. Henderson seems to think so. I need to see a doctor to be sure, but..." She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Archer, I'm terrified." He knelt in front of her. "Why?" "Because I don't know how to do this. Because my lungs are weak, and pregnancy might make them worse. Because what if something goes wrong? What if I'm not a good mother? What if..." "Stop." He took her face in his hands. "We'll figure it out, just like we've figured out everything else. Together." "You're not scared?" "I'm terrified, but I'm also happy. We're going to have a baby, Josephine. Our baby." She started crying then, great hiccuping sobs that shook her whole body. Archer held her through it, whispering reassurances, promising everything would be all right, even though neither of them knew if that was true. When she finally calmed down, she laughed wetly. "Daniel's going to be so smug. He literally wished for this." Kids got good instincts. They told Daniel that night at dinner. His reaction was exactly what they expected. "I knew it," he crowed. "My wish came true." "Wishes don't work that way," Archer said. This one did. The boy was practically bouncing. "When's the baby coming?" February, probably, Josephine said. Maybe March. That's forever away. It'll go faster than you think. Daniel peppered them with questions. Would it be a boy or girl? What would they name it? Could he help take care of it? Would it sleep in his room? They answered what they could and deflected what they couldn't, both of them still processing this new reality. Later in bed, Josephine turned to Archer. Are we ready for this? Probably not, but nobody's ever really ready. That's not comforting. It's honest. He kissed her forehead. We'll make mistakes. We'll be exhausted and confused and overwhelmed. But we'll love this kid, and we'll do our best, and that's all anyone can do. What if my lungs can't handle it? What if I can't? Then we'll deal with it. We'll get help. We'll find a way. He put his hand on her still flat belly. But I believe you're strong enough. You've survived everything else. You'll survive this too. She put her hand over his. We'll survive it. Yeah, we will. The pregnancy was hard. Josephine's lungs struggled with the extra weight and reduced capacity. Some days she couldn't get out of bed without gasping for air. The doctor came regularly, monitoring her, warning them that the last months would be the worst. But Josephine refused to be defeated. She modified her work, found ways to help without overexerting herself. Archer took on more of the household tasks. Daniel stepped up in ways that made them both proud, helping with cooking and cleaning without being asked. We're a team, he said when Archer thanked him. Teams help each other. As autumn turned to winter, Josephine grew rounder and slower. She couldn't do as much, which frustrated her endlessly. I hate being useless, she said one December afternoon, watching Archer and Daniel prepare dinner. You're growing a human, Archer said. That's the opposite of useless. I should be helping. You are helping, by resting and keeping that baby healthy. He brought her tea. Let us take care of you for once. I don't like being taken care of. Too bad. You're stuck with us. She grumbled but accepted the tea. Archer knew how hard this was for her, being dependent, being vulnerable. But she was trying, and that was enough. Christmas came again, their second together. They kept it simple, but Daniel insisted on decorating. He strung popcorn garlands and made paper snowflakes, transforming the house into something festive. On Christmas morning, they exchanged small gifts and ate too much of Josephine's cookies. Next year, there'll be a baby here, Daniel said, eyes wide. A real baby for Christmas. If we're lucky, Josephine said, hand on her large belly. We're already lucky, Archer said, looking at his family. January brought bitter cold and mounting concern. The doctor warned them the baby could come any time now. Mrs. Henderson moved into the spare room, refusing to leave Josephine without experienced help nearby. I've delivered dozens of babies, she said firmly, and with your lungs you'll need someone who knows what they're doing. Josephine was too tired to argue. She spent most days in bed now, breathing labored, belly enormous. Archer sat with her when he could, reading aloud or just holding her hand. I'm scared, she admitted one night. I know. Women die doing this. Women with stronger lungs than mine. You're not going to die. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll be right here, whatever happens. He kissed her forehead. You're the strongest person I know, Josephine. If anyone can do this, you can. I hope you're right. The baby came on a freezing February night, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Josephine's water broke just after midnight, and from there everything happened fast. Mrs. Henderson took charge immediately, ordering Archer to boil water and keep Daniel occupied. The labor was long and difficult. Josephine's breathing was already compromised, and the exertion made it worse. Archer stayed by her side, despite Mrs. Henderson's suggestion that he wait downstairs holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was doing great, even when she was clearly suffering. I can't, she gasped after 6 hours. I can't do this. Yes, you can. You're almost there. Archer, look at me. He waited until her pain-glazed eyes focused. You escaped Chicago. You built a home from nothing. You fought off legal threats and made a life here. You can do this. I know you can. She bore down with a scream that shook the walls. Mrs. Henderson worked efficiently, murmuring encouragement, and then suddenly there was a different sound. A thin, angry wail. It's a girl, Mrs. Henderson announced, holding up a tiny, squalling infant. Josephine collapsed back against the pillows, gasping for air. Archer couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare at this impossible thing, a daughter. Mrs. Henderson cleaned the baby quickly, wrapped her, and placed her in Josephine's arms. The infant quieted immediately, and Josephine stared down at her in wonder. "She's so small," Josephine whispered. "She's perfect," Archer said, voice rough. Daniel appeared in the doorway, eyes huge. "Can I see?" "Come here," Josephine said. The boy approached carefully, looking at his new sister with awe. "She's really little. You were this little once. What's her name?" Archer and Josephine looked at each other. They discussed names, but never quite decided. "Sarah," Josephine said quietly. "After a girl I once knew, a girl who deserved better." "Sarah Rowan," Archer tested. "Yeah, that fits." They sat together, the four of them now, in the lamplight, marveling at this new life they'd created. Outside, Montana winter raged. Inside, everything was warm and right. The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Sarah cried often, nursed constantly, kept them all awake at odd hours. But she was healthy and strong, and Josephine recovered faster than anyone expected. "Your lungs are actually better," the doctor said during a checkup. "Sometimes pregnancy does that, changes things for the better." "So I went through all that worry for nothing?" Josephine asked. "Not for nothing. You were careful. You rested when needed. That's probably why everything turned out well." The doctor packed his bag. "You've got a healthy baby and a second chance at your own health. I'd call that a victory." After he left, Josephine held Sarah and cried. "Hey," Archer said, sitting beside her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I'm so grateful for all of this. For you and Daniel and Sarah and this life we've built." She looked at him with shining eyes. "A year and a half ago I was running, terrified, convinced I'd never have anything good again. And now look at us." "Yeah, look at us." Spring came early that year, as if making up for the harsh winter. The land exploded with life and color. Archer expanded the ranch again, buying more cattle, planting more wheat. Josephine managed the household with Sarah strapped to her chest, somehow juggling a baby and all her other work. Daniel proved to be a natural big brother, patient and gentle with Sarah, singing to her when she cried, making her laugh with silly faces. "You're good at this," Josephine told him one afternoon. "She's easy. She just wants to be held and fed and changed. It's not complicated." Spoken like someone who's never been solely responsible for her. "I could be, if you needed me to." He looked at her seriously. "I'm not a little kid anymore. I can help for real. I know you can, and I'm grateful." By summer, they'd found their rhythm as a family of four. The ranch prospered. The house rang with laughter and occasional arguments, and all the messy noise of actual living. They had hard days and easy days, struggles and victories, all of it woven together into something that felt permanent. One evening in late August, Archer sat on the porch watching the sunset. Josephine joined him, Sarah asleep in her arms. "Feels like we've been here forever," she said. "It's been less than 2 years." "I know. But my life before Chicago, running, all of that, it feels like it happened to someone else." "In a way, it did. You're not that person anymore. Neither are you. The man who ordered a mail-order bride out of desperation is gone. You're confident now. Happy. So are you," she smiled. "Yeah, I am." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their land turn gold in the fading light. Daniel appeared from the barn, waving something, probably another insect he wanted to show them. Sarah stirred and made soft baby noises. Normal life, continuing in its beautiful, imperfect way. "You know what I realized?" Josephine said. "What?" "We built this. You and me. From absolutely nothing, from loneliness and desperation and fear, we built something real. Something lasting." She looked at him. "That's not small. That matters." "Yeah," Archer said, putting his arm around her. "It really does." Because that was the thing about frontier life, about Montana, about all of it. The land didn't care if you succeeded or failed. It just offered you space, an opportunity, and the chance to try. What you did with that chance was up to you. Archer and Josephine had chosen to build, to fight for what they wanted instead of accepting what seemed possible, to trust each other when trust seemed foolish. to love when love seemed risky. And they'd won. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but definitively. They'd created a home, a family, a future worth having. As the sun dropped below the horizon and stars began appearing, Archer thought about how far they'd all come. A desperate rancher, a broken woman, a silent boy. All of them lost in different ways, and now they were found, together, building something that would outlast them all. "I love you," he said to Josephine. "I love you too," she replied, leaning into him. Sarah slept peacefully between them. Daniel ran toward the house, excited about his discovery. The Montana wind sang through the grass, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not easy, but real and true, and earned through hard work and harder choices. Theirs, forever.